Good evening, everyone. When the clerk is ready, I call this meeting to order. Committee of the Whole, of the Urbana City Council. Clerk, when you're ready, please call the roll.
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Ms. Colasetti,
Here.
Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry, Ms. Marlin.
Here.
I am here.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the previous meeting, October 18th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from October 18th.
I'll second.
It was moved by Grace, second by Mary Alice. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, clerk, would you call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Mr. Evans?
Move to add a 10-minute presentation on license plate readers and their alternatives under presentation by Zachary Norris, an attorney and executive director of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and author of the book Defund Fear, Safety Without Policing, Prisons and Punishment, and co-founder of Justice for Families, a national organization working on criminal justice issues. There would be a presentation tonight for 10 minutes.
Okay, that does there need to be a second for that?
I'll second it.
Grace? All right, Chris moved to add a presentation to the agenda, seconded by Grace. We need a roll call for that?
If you want one, I'll give you one.
No, that's okay.
You're making an addition to the agenda. There should be
Yeah.
a roll call.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Can I ask, where is this going on the agenda? Is it going after the civilian police review presentation?
It
That's
can.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you ready? Okay. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. It'll be added to presentations after the CPRB report. And before we get to public input and presentations, Mayor Marlin, you had some words.
Oh, I had another addition to the agenda or change.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Grace.
Oh, sorry. I was just also going to propose for discussions that we switch items A and B under item 8 for discussions in case we run out of time. I don't know if we need to vote since that's just an amendment and switching the order.
I think that's fine. Okay. Does it need to be voted on? It's not an addition, it's just a reordering.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes you can vote too much on things such as simple stuff like this. You can just say that we're going to move this around instead of going through the whole process.
Got it. Thank you, Phyllis.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have any additions or reordering to the agenda? Okay. Mayor Marlin?
Yes, I'd like to take this moment to express our sincere condolences to the family of Dr. Eric Jacobson, especially to his wife Naomi and his children and grandchildren. Eric Jacobson passed away Thursday, October 28th. Eric represented Ward 2 on the Urbana City Council from 2010 to 2020. During that time, he also served as a council representative to the Urbana Free Library Board, the Public Arts and Culture Commission, and the Traffic Commission. He was an accomplished researcher and teacher at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He was active in local, state, and national politics. He was devoted to the arts and to his community, and he was devoted to his family. And as Naomi said, he was a true Renaissance man. He was a man of great character and principle and humor. He is greatly missed and he was deeply loved. The memorial service plans are incomplete at this time, but when we learn them, we'll share them with you. Thank you.
We'll have Ricardo Diaz, CPRB Chair, and Colin Wilson, CPRB Member, give a presentation on the Civilian Police Review Board 5-year report.
Good evening, and thank you for the time to present to you tonight. Colin and I are representing our 5-member board, and we'd like to actually come more regularly to report on what we're doing and to get a feeling for also some of the issues that come up for you. Today, we want to bring you what may seem to some as just a pothole that needed to be filled, but for us, it is a good summary of times in which the information wasn't quite flowing from CPRB to council. So I'm going to share this report. We'll send it to you as soon as we can after the last bit of comments, but we wanted to bring to you what we have thus far. In full anticipation that we'll have the 2020 report soon, now that we have a template, so that we can be up to date when it comes to the formal part of reporting to you. As you can see here, there's 2005 to 2019. We have taken that liberty to include mostly because as the report was prepared, it was incorporating a lot of info. The actual data of some of these of the early years was put together in smaller, the annual reports, but we thought it's time to get a comprehensive view of what's been going on so that it'll contrast with the 2020 report. I just think that there's been a lot of people that have been through CPRB making their comments and decisions. Over the last year, we have done probably more hearings than ever before, but the CPRB, as much as some people would like to think it grew out of contention. I was just looking at a report from Laurel when she corrected the newspaper saying that this was if you will, a preemptive way of heading off problems. Our present 5 members, we're missing 2. We'd welcome any suggestions for people have been working on going through quite a number of hearings, both of taking the complaints and those that make it to appeals. We are also cleaning up what the previous process were, and you guys have participated in some of that, as we mentioned at other meetings. But we wanted to have a state to contrast it as to what was happening as to that data, because as you can see here from the numbers of complaints received and then the fewer ones that you'll find in the report that made it to complaints, the numbers went up and down, but a rather conservative number given our area. Some would say that's because people don't want to complain because they won't be heard. I don't see any data that would validate that. I have to trust that the past is a good foundation to what we see. So I'm going to turn the time over to Colin to go over both on the classification of what has been received over the years and then where we are. So I'll hold it here and Colin.
Thanks, Ricardo. So a lot of this data comes from many years ago. You can see we're going back all the way from in some cases 2005. So this data is sort of an amalgamation of just a number of years up to 2019. Now, a lot of this was put together by our previous board member and good friend, Scott Dossett, who had to go through manually. He's got to go through each report and classify it, take some numbers on it, and then add big spreadsheets, and then we arrive here. So once we start to put all the data together, this is what it starts to look like. We've got something like 12 different classifications from excessive police service. You can see unlawful search, failure to take action, missing or damaged property, unlawful arrests. The biggest, we see the most of, you can see rude conduct at 15.3%, unofficer-like conduct, that would be, something unbecoming of an officer, harassment, and an improper procedure. Those form the bulk of our complaints over the last decade and a half or so. So for us,
definitions.
Oh yeah, if you want to scroll, I think it's scroll up a bit, we can read a bit more.
Yeah.
And all of you will have this report in your hands if you want to look into more of these details. I believe these classifications were sort of determined a number of years ago before I was even on the board, but we've got some definitions here and there's a little bit of overlap, but these are the basic ideas. So once a complaint goes to the Urbana Police Department, they'll do their internal investigation, and the police chief will make a sort of a final decision. He'll decide whether it's a founded complaint or unfounded, or and then there are more options here: insufficient evidence or no jurisdiction. Maybe it's not, doesn't have to do with the police department at all. They could be a resolved complaint or pending. Oftentimes, if there are court cases ongoing, it can't be that the complaint can't be processed or handled by us until that court complaint or the court process is over with. And so next table, we can see what those decisions by the police chief look like in that time period. An overwhelming majority, the police chief says, are unfounded. Some are 11.5% are founded, and then you can see the smattering of the rest fall within the remaining categories.
Especially because there are so few, it's the impact of seeing those categories and how things resulted naturally gives us a want to say something more, except that the numbers are pretty clear as to where things had been classified, and then especially as things come up to rise up to the level of an appeal of what are those complaints. For me, it's important to note that we may have classifications given in the ordinance, but as a resident, the perception that they have is very much based both on the interaction with the police and then as things come up as from the letter from the chief. All of these, well, actually, I'm pretty sure all of them are before our present chief. But the letters that go out sometimes can be very well constrained as to our language for legal purposes, but they don't necessarily explain to the person where things don't fit. For example, the police chief may say that they were unfounded because procedure was followed. Well, when you feel that the officer has been rude, there's no feeling in there for procedure was followed, because that would mean that the procedure was to be rude. But as we've gotten into this over the last year, and we'll have our own report, we wanted to fill in and give you a backdrop for how things had been going and the accumulation of these reports. So for us, this concludes a very short presentation of what happened. You'll have a copy of this. We're missing a couple of pictures that we want to drop in to have it there, and we're open for questions on this.
Thank you, Chair Diaz and Member Wilson. Any council members have any questions? James, I see your hand.
Yeah, actually, if you could roll back to the slide before this one, I have a question about the 69 improper procedures. Is there any kind of evaluation as to the magnitude of the improper procedure? And what I mean is, if improper procedure involves like a firearm or how a vehicle is being driven, the risk of that improper procedure having a very bad outcome is higher than maybe some other more minor procedures that aren't being followed. But do you have any way to assess how many of those 69 improper procedures were high risk or high likelihood of a problem if they went badly versus ones that are more like administrative improper procedures?
So again, the definition of improper procedure is an internal one, which may or may not include. We often forget that the residents don't know what procedure may be. And therefore then when we classify it as improper procedure, it will have that gamut as you mentioned. Let me give you Appendix B in this report has a listing of the complaints. Sometimes, you know, as they're classified and we looked into it, so there's a separate tracking, which would probably come when there's a use of firearms, as you mentioned, because the use of force is internally classified elsewhere. So it seems like those are the ones you're interested in. Probably that's a good question for the police department, because when it comes to us as a complaint, there's all kinds of information on there for the particular cases. But as you notice here, even at the top, as you mentioned, as you asked, each year, several of them might qualify as a proper procedure, but after they go through the process, they end up being withdrawn too. So I went with Scott through the early years, actually 15 and 16, to make sure that we were classifying under the same terms, you know, to cross-check it, get a good inter-rate of reliability on it. And frankly, the situations can be very disparate. And so to fall into a particular category ends up being an improper procedure because we might not have room somewhere else. And so that's why I say when it comes to the use of weapons, the use of force would probably be better than what rose to a complaint. They are mostly not use of weapons. Those cases end up under a separate category also because they're more likely also to have a court, some kind of legal outcome, and so they don't end up being here. This has been very poignant to us this year in learning through hearings. A lot of cases don't make it to us because they go to court. And even the threat of the use of court can disqualify a case from coming to us. It's a limitation that has its pluses and minuses because what we have is a sampling of what went on. Those things that went into some kind of legal action then wouldn't be part of this. And again, that relates to probably a use of force or use of weapon.
Okay, thank you.
We can be more detailed on what our last year was because all members of the board, except for myself, are new over the last year. slightly over a year. So there, other members of the board will have details that we go. We've also established a better procedure for keeping track. We have a portal in which we see all cases, and we've established the norm that a certain number of documents of items must be in the portal for us to see, both redacted and unredacted copies of letters and items that go through there. The police don't have access to our portal, and so as things are there, what we'd like to promulgate is we have made an agreement that any material related to a case must be in the portal for us to have full consideration. If you want to be fair, we need to have everything in there. And it hasn't always been the case, but especially the norm when changing staff has also gone up and down. Some of the data holes are very much due to people coming in and out.
Grace?
Yeah. I just wanted to know if after going through the CPRB and whether it's determined if something was founded or unfounded or whatever, and let's say that it was founded, that the complaint was a legitimate complaint. Do you guys find out what happens in the course of discipline to an officer or anything like that? Does that go through you guys?
Good question. I would say.
Sorry, that was another question built in.
No, it was Column. He was going to.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that those fall under the bargaining contract. The FOP does not share those with us. Those are kept in-house.
Okay.
So we don't have data on the discipline that happened with the officers, and we don't have data accumulated where there is information that would tag an officer. That is, we could not tell you if a particular officer has more discipline attached to their record or not. We at other reports, they had tried to put in the number of complaints by geography, which part of Urbana more complaints were coming from. We have not done that in this report. As you go through, we will find out whether it's worth putting in. We try to put what was useful. We have eliminated some categories of things that were too scattered to be, to be able to deduce something from. But that specific information sure is and can be part of what you guys discuss to empower us to do it. And I know and I'm very aware that contracts are impacted, but as we discussed last time we were here, there are some items that are, we can give our opinion, but ultimately the work has to be done through you and through administration.
Thank you.
Questions, Grace?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I look forward to reading the full report, so I don't have, very good questions about it now, not reading through it. But I appreciate the presentation and putting this together and spanning quite a long time where the data wasn't compiled and doing all of that backtracking, kind of catching up work. So I appreciate that. And I would definitely look forward to having more involved conversations and communication with CPRB and council and other things that are going on so that we can be more connected for that kind of stuff in the future. And I did want to, thank you. I also wanted to echo the idea that Sharice brought up about officer identification that you were addressing. And that is something else that some members of the public have brought up and wasn't sure exactly where to address it, but I guess I'll mention it here too, that would be useful to have a coded officer identification system for data tracking, where it would be a coded system. So it would be officer AB73, and you have data on maybe complaints or racial traffic stops and things like that, but you don't know who that officer is. You could just see, is there a pattern of certain people more than others over time that needs to be looked at, as far as internal processing and also external accountability and public access. I think some of the people who also track this kind of data have expressed that that would also be helpful, and wondering if there's a way that we can do it that protects officers, their privacy and confidentiality, and we can still look at the data on that individual level.
We appreciate that request. It is an interest that floats. The thing that gets me is there is always a suspicion that there might be a bad apple in there that we could discern or find out about. I think that one of the things that we would and could use as we search out this data is maybe what we find out is that our officers are doing quite well, thank you. But we can't say that when we don't have information in either direction. So you'll find that we have requested that we get to see you once a month, probably at your first meeting per month, so we can be reporting on our actions. Thank you, Mary Alice, for coming to the meeting and putting in a comment. We realize it's not, you are very busy people and you have a lot of tasks before you, but having a regular liaison or a pop-in visit as with Mary Alice, it validates that we are pursuing the same items and the same goals. So if you don't mind, we'll be requesting then a monthly, some months more report than others, since we can't produce 5-year reports every month. But we'd like to be here for questions and take turns so you get to meet a few members of the board.
Mary Alice, did you have a hand?
Yeah, I did have a question. Thank you. I know it's a lot of work. I know this took a lot of time, so thank you very much. And Scott, if you're out there listening, thank you for all of your service and for the amount of time that you put into this as well. I did want to make the delineation. So a complaint comes into the police department, the chief of police looks at the complaint, investigates it on their own, and then makes a founded or an unfounded. And then if the citizen is not happy with that resolution, then they can make an appeal to CPRB, right? And then that's when they come to you. And that's when
it comes to us officially to hear it, but we have access to all the complaints as they come. The procedure now is that since we have an HREO, it goes directly to that office. It does not go to the police. There's a record made, our portal's open, and now stuff is scanned so we can begin to see it and track it, if you will. And then when it goes to the police chief, he assigns somebody else to investigate. And then he makes a determination based on that report from one of the other officers. It used to be deputy chief, but now it spreads out and people change. Other assignments are done. Parentheses, we will come back to talk a little bit more about tasers. They are included in this report as far as numbers, but I think that things are brimming up again so that we have better definitions and therefore a better report for the next production.
So I thank you for that clarification in terms of the process and especially what the process is currently right now. In terms of the report, so I guess what I'd like to be clear about is you have founded, unfounded, mediated, pending, you have these kind of categories. The unfounded and founded, are those classifications that the CPRB did on some kind of assessment, or is that what the police department concluded based on that? I just wanted to make that clear.
The police chief makes that determination when he gets the report. And I'm saying he, although we had Sylvia for a little bit there. And then, so there are those classifications that are made by the police chief, and then that's where then the resident would react to that or not. But you must also know that when we come back with recommendations for the change of the ordinance, there is also another limitations because we as a board can only respond in a few categorical ways. One of them is to support the chief's findings letter. and one is not to support the chief's findings letter. And the other three, recommending mediation or getting more information, we have found ourselves several times in not having enough information or having too much information that precludes us from actually assigning it one of those categories. So as we come back, there might be a way for us and the police to classify items differently so that it's richer information rather than sometimes a technical word that does not translate well to public relations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Oh, sorry.
I think we've got a few more questions for you.
Go ahead.
Jaya?
Yeah, I just want to quickly thank you both for the report too. I know you all are very busy as well. And just to say that I do hope that we see CPRB more regularly involved and engaged with the council. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Chris?
Thank you very much for this great report and your work. Are you reviewing incidents of taser use?
Want to speak to that, Colin? Or?
Yeah, we are reviewing all of the discharges of the taser by the police as of maybe 2019. Previous to that, starting in the 2015 ordinance change to the CPRB, we were reviewing every single display or discharge. Since I think maybe 2 years ago or last year, we voted as a board as it became hugely over encumbering to review every single unholstering of the taser, given especially that the footage was from the taser cam and you were looking at the ground for about 10 seconds. And we, as I understand it, they were meeting weekly to watch 10 seconds of footage. And I believe the board decided at that time that it was not a good use of the volunteers' time to do that. So now I believe we're just reviewing discharges of the taser.
Is it your understanding that? Oh, go ahead, Ricardo.
Sure, Ricardo.
Just to put in something that has been brought up, and it's true. The ordinance still says that we should be reviewing all usage of the tasers. We voted within to modify that to only do discharges, but we have not yet been supported as to a change of ordinance, and that can come with a larger set of changes to our work. But right now we are not matching what the ordinance says and what we've been doing. There hasn't been a lot of taser usage yet. I'm looking for the best log I have shows me very few usages, but you never know. And so that has to be clarified between the ordinance and our present function. Sorry.
Is it your understanding that you are not allowed as a board to vote on whether an individual officer misuses a taser? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And I remember Scotty and police representative and myself were in the room when we were trying to figure out how do we make good use of the information. And what ended up and it's part of this report, taser usage procedures, was that when it came to us as a CPRB, we would take them in batches. We would take them in groups and then make recommendations as to policy given that. Now, that did not preclude us to consider every item and talk about in our meeting about what was proper and what was not and what we observed. This is often very important because as a resident, you want to see either validation or want to see whether what's reasonable or not. And it was our practice to display, to put on TV during our meetings, those relevant parts so that people would see. There has been a lot of education about taser usage. 7 years ago, we were very hesitant. I ended up changing my mind as a result of that process. And so, yes, we're supposed to make policy recommendations, but we have seen them individually, and we have said we have never tagged them to an officer, again, because we don't have that record, and we sometimes may not have known who the officer was. We used to also get what's it called, blacked out information on that. But I must say that as we did it, we came up with good practice. And at the last meeting of the CPRB, which was last Wednesday, with Deputy Chief Searles, we agreed that we are going to review items on every quarter, any taser cases, so that we can catch up with each other and have that information directly to us and therefore to the public as it comes on TV.
Last question. Is it your understanding that all other uses of force besides tasers are reviewed by a some kind of review board within the police department, a use of force review board?
Yes, and we are not privy to it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more council questions? I actually have one. Mary Ellis, would you take the chair?
Sure, the chair recognizes Chandra.
Chair Diaz, thank you again for presenting this information to us. I wonder, in doing this report, do you see any areas in which you would change your data collection? You mentioned the improper procedure and how broad that is. I also wondered if, I guess it goes to Grace's point about sort of coding the officers to determine whether it's multiple officers doing improper procedures or a group of the same officers, because then that sort of speaks to the training and where training could be bolstered. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Colum, you want to address the column?
Yeah, so I think Ricardo's referring to part of the data that was recorded in previous yearly reports that some council members may recognize is missing here, and that's the demographic information of the complainant. Previously, the board members who were writing these reports would classify each of the complaints, and they would try to suss out the demographic information of each person who submitted the complaint, and then try to then take that and then look at bird's eye view of what these complaints look like. How many complaints are coming from men, from women, from any race, nationality. But in doing our in sort of cross-checking these complaints, we just weren't very confident about this sort of data, and we felt that if our procedure was asked about how we obtained this data, we would have to shrug our shoulders and say that it might be that somebody guessed or had to go from, if a complainant self-identifies as where the primary information comes from. So we eliminated that piece of data. So it might be that in the future, our complaints to the HREO could have a field for, what's your demographics. That would be if we were to want more data, and Ricardo can add more, but that would be one area we might want better data from.
The forum presently has those categories, but they're optional, and there was no systematic way of making sure that data came on. We could have, and we tried at times to look through the report, because the police officer's report will have some of that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same unless they correlated it between themselves. So yes, that information probably will help us see patterns and see what you mentioning, Chandra, but we would have to then enable a procedure to pick it up. And so I believe that that's part of what you should ask. And therefore then, if you send us the questions on this report and on the next one, we can build it in as a recommendation for you all to then consider and figure out how to do it. One of the reasons that we didn't have information was we were short-staffed for a while as to who was handling from human resources was receiving and processing complaints. But importantly, from there, how this information could be followed and who it was. That we have one citizen, I'll never forget his, because he was so meticulous in saying, why don't we just give a 3x5 every time that there's a interaction with police, and that person can use that 3x5 with the information to report positive or negative. We may find out that we have a lot more positive cards than not. In pursuing that, one of the things we found out that if we did something as simple as that, we would have to have some kind of assignment of monies to have somebody enter it and prepare that data. Right now, there's a company that has been calling on me to collect that information on a website and then provide us report with all the normal caveats. You know, we would own the data, it's secure, whatever. In talking to Carla, we have a weekly meeting, and she says that she will be working on that because it might not have to go to an outside person. Maybe we should do key. Now we have a staff to talk to about those issues, and as we gather the questions and the will, we'd be very happy to work on it because we are also with voids in the information we have.
All right. Would you like the chair back, Chandra?
Take the chair back.
All right. It's yours.
Okay. Any other questions before we say thank you and goodbye? Okay. All right.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your time. Should I go ahead and get started?
Yes, please. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Thank you to the mayor, council members. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who I am, what happened to me and my family, and I think how we can do better. So those are kind of the main outlines of my talk. Just starting off, I'm the executive director of an organization called the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and we're based in Oakland, California. We are named after Ella Baker, who's a brilliant Black woman who believed in the power of everyday people to make change. She organized with students and sharecroppers alike. And we try to build on her legacy by advancing what we call a books not bars, jobs not jails, healthcare and housing not handcuffs agenda. We like alliteration, as you can tell. And we also like to move resources to what we believe are kind of public health approaches to public health issues. And our assessment is that in this country, we have criminalized a number of different kinds of conduct that really could be dealt with from a more public health approach. And the book that was referenced earlier, Defund Fear, really outlines some of those arguments. But a little bit more about who I am. I came to this work almost about 20 years ago, even more than that actually, as a undergrad at Harvard University. I saw young people treated much differently than my peers who I grew up with in East Oakland. And those young people at Harvard were doing things like using and abusing drugs, getting involved with, getting engaged in fights, but they were always treated as if they were more than the worst thing that they've ever done. And that's something I believe should apply to all of us, regardless of what school we go to or what zip code we live in. That each of us should be treated as more than the worst thing we've ever done. And that's something that one of my mentors, Brian Stevenson, has often talked about. And it was as a result of seeing some of those disparities, seeing the difference in how my classmates at Harvard were treated versus friends and family who are getting locked up and incarcerated in youth and adult jails and prisons for doing some of the same things, that led me to an interest in advocacy around the criminal court system. I would also say, though, that I am a parent, and I am someone who deeply cares about safety. I live in the same zip code that I grew up in, 94605. It is a zip code where police responses are often delayed and crime is present very much. The first year we moved into our home was broken into 2 different times. The second time, I remember going into my daughter's bedroom. They were just toddlers at the time, and picking up these big shards of glass off of their bed. And thankfully, we weren't home, but it really led me to sort of question my own beliefs and thoughts around this distinction between human rights and safety, right? It came home in a particular way in that instance. And I think sometimes human rights or privacy, our constitutional rights get pitted against safety, right? But I would argue that that safety and human rights are actually mutually reinforcing, and that if you want safety, you actually have to support people, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I want to talk more specifically about 2 examples of the ways in which I see human rights and safety being kind of mutually reinforcing. But before moving to that, I want to talk to you about the second thing I promised to talk about, which was what happened to me and my family and a friend who was in the car with us. This was just this year. My wife and kids were in the back of the car. My friend, who is also African American, but darker skinned than me, closer to my dad's color than my own, was in the front seat. And we had just come from this beautiful, amazing hike in Mount Diablo. And for those who know the Bay Area, just gorgeous sun setting. We're driving back through Walnut Creek. And Walnut Creek is a city not much larger than Urbana. And first there was one set of police lights behind us, and then there was another. And I pulled over thinking that the cops are going to just keep driving right by us. But it was actually my older daughter who said, "No, Dad, I think they're trying to stop us." Because after I pulled over, then I pulled back into traffic, thinking they had gone by us, and then pulled over again. And as the booming voice came over the loudspeaker saying, "Roll down your window, throw out your keys, come out with your hands up," it became very clear to me that this was not an ordinary traffic stop. And as they're giving these different commands, throw out your keys, but also unlock your door, I'm confused. And I did make it out of the car and follow their directions to put my hands up, raised my waistband as they were telling me to do, backed up with my hands in the air. And before I started backing up, they asked me to turn around slowly. And all the lights are blaring at me, but I can tell that there must be at least 7 cop cars and probably twice as many guns pointed at me. Well, I back up and back up and back up past the back of my car, thinking about my kids watching all of this happening, wondering what they're thinking. And as I get down onto my knees, I see that my license plate is not my license plate. Long story short, about a half an hour later, after my friend had been detained, after my children had been made to sit in a separate area, after had been driven away from them and they didn't know what was happening to me, it turned out that I avoided the worst of the confrontation. But I thought about that I could have been a hashtag. This was as a result of the use of automated license plate readers in the city of Walnut Creek. We know that historically 99.97% of these tags never lead to criminal investigations. License plate readers don't reduce gun violence. And that what they do is put people in precarious situations where Black and brown people are disproportionately likely to be harmed by the police. And I just don't think it's worth it. When we start to take care of the public, I think we will start to take better care of public safety. What I see us trying to do is respond with the same push towards surveillance, the same push towards incarceration and criminalization, rather than actually addressing underlying causes of crime. And I want to conclude by giving two examples briefly, because I know I have about a minute, of ways in which I see human rights and safety being mutually reinforcing. One is we waged a near decade-long campaign to close youth prisons across the state of California. And people said that was crazy. It was a far out, anti-safety idea. But as we closed youth prisons within the state of California, youth crime also continued to decline because those abusive youth prisons were no longer tracking young people into adult incarceration. The 3 out of 4 young people were no longer being rearrested and sent into the adult prison system. Similarly, the city of Richmond, and I'll close with this anecdote, was also faced with rising crime around the turn of the century. They had one of the highest per capita murder rates in the country at the time. And the police chief and the city council and everybody was up in arms about what to do. They had tried all the traditional approaches, the sort of, in my mind, trail 'em, nail 'em, and jail 'em approaches. And a person named Devone Bogan presented a different idea, which was, given the police had been able to, ascertain who were primarily responsible for, they believe, the homicides in the city of Richmond, they developed, instead of that same approach, they used an approach of mentorship, an approach of support for these young men, an approach of actually engaging them as participants in the problem of reducing violence within the city of Richmond. And as a result of that approach, they reduced homicides by some 70%. This program only received pennies on the dollar in comparison to the Richmond Police Department, but had an outsized impact in terms of public safety. It meant that these young men were no longer involved in those activities, but also that mothers and grandmothers felt safer to bring their kids to the park, that business owners felt safer to keep their doors open longer. So it was not just a win for human rights and public safety, but also for the economic vitality of the city of Richmond. So I appreciate you all for really taking these issues seriously and considering all of these factors in weighing your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. Are there any questions council members have for Mr. Norris? Yes, Sharice.
Hi, Mr. Norris. I'm a council member, Sharice Hersey, and it was actually me and someone else in my ward that we originally, to be honest, wanted to bring surveillance cameras into not just our neighborhood, but someplace, because we have so many unknown offenders. So let me ask you, what did you all do to deal with people that were shooting? There are many mentorship type programs in the area of Champaign-Urbana. Some of them have been going for years and continue to be funded either through grants that they get or even city money. So my question to you then is, how does one deal with the immediate issue?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I would encourage folks to check out advancepeace.org and the work of Devon Bogan in the city of Richmond. What they did was not just your typical kind of mentorship program. They also directly subsidized and supported these young men through monthly stipends, through travel opportunities. And it was a sort of intensive, immersive program that was specifically targeted towards folks that the Richmond Police Department had identified as being responsible for some of the shootings in the city, but for different reasons, they couldn't make the case on these young men. And so it was through that approach of more direct targeting of particular individuals and support around those individuals that really sort of made the difference. So it was a very much immediate program. It wasn't, just a sort of a preventative one, but also an intervention-based program. And I think, my perception is that, well, I'll pause there because I realize there may be other questions and
I just want to follow up with that because the issue here is, I don't know we don't know if these are young people or if these are grown men that are committing these murders or shootings. And not all murders, but definitely a lot of shootings. And as like unlike Oakland, I lived in LA, the LA County area, and lived in LA period for a long period of time. And I know, somewhat of the history of Oakland. And I know about the police brutality and historically in Oakland, which has not really ever really happened here in Urbana. Not to that extent. But there's been, quite an evolution of how the police interact as years have gone by. So I guess I would like to know some kind of a solution where we would be able to catch the perpetrators of these crimes, so that the mentorship programs that are in place will actually be able to take hold, will actually have a long-term effect, because I don't see it as an either or thing. I see it as in conjunction with, but I know there are a lot of families here that are hurting because that trauma is a perpetual trauma. When someone's been murdered in your family, that traumatizes everybody in the family, and it becomes a perpetual thing. So I just wanted to know what kind of
absolutely. Yeah. And so we I first would respond to you raise a number of different things. One about young people, the second about sort of Urbana and Oakland, and the third about kind of trauma. And I want to address each of those things. So in the city of Richmond, where this program was done, youth was defined very liberally, kind of in the international sense of the word, like under 35. So these were very much adults who were involved in the program. And it was a successful program, not just for young people, but really because they identified the folks who were believed to be responsible for these shootings, and because they took an approach that actually interrupted cycles of poverty, violence, and incarceration. And I think that is something that is so super important to name, we live in a society where, you know, in Richmond, California, the same neighborhoods, the same zip codes, you can trace back to where when the World War II ended, African Americans were stuck in these, you know, same neighborhoods in ways that didn't offer opportunities. So there were these cycles of poverty, violence, and incarceration. And I think that we tend to believe that through adopting the same approach, that we are going to get out of that cycle. And I don't believe that's the case. In terms of, you know, Urbana's record, Walnut Creek also does not have, you know, isn't known as sort of a haven of police brutality. But I think it only takes just one instance, right? When I was pulled over, it was just based on a license plate. That was it. And 14 different guns drawn on me, 14 different people who could have made that mistake, right? Just based on a license plate. They did no other corroboration or confirmation. And I don't understand that that is typically the case. And so and that brings me back to the point of trauma, which is we, you know, did a national survey called Who Pays the True Cost of Incarceration on Families. And this was a report that was of people who were directly impacted by our criminal court system, which, by the way, are your same constituents who are impacted by violence, right? Because we know that the same communities that are most harmed by violence in communities are the same communities that are disproportionately found in our jails and prisons in this country. And that violence starts with violence more often than not. And so when we did that report, we heard from survivors of crime that they wanted to do something different. Now, this isn't an overnight switch, right? As you said, it isn't necessarily just a strict either or, but I think what we can do is, as city council persons, as neighbors who are informing our city council persons, we can hold up a mirror to say, does this add to surveillance? Does this add to the culture of suspicion and fear that has driven the incarceration of Black and brown people, that has accelerated their morbidity and mortality, undermined their life chances, and continued these cycles of poverty, violence, and incarceration? Or does it do something different? And from my perspective, adding additional license plate readers, or for that matter, video cameras in neighborhoods, does not, in fact, actually begin to shift that dynamic. Here in Alameda County, I can't speak for the resource questions that you all are seeing, but we are very disappointed with our municipal government, who have a rainy day fund and don't seem to be leveraging that fund to support people who are desperate or in desperate times, given COVID-19, climate change, growing inequality, and jobs that don't pay enough. And so from our perspective, we're seeing upticks in crime because of that desperate situation, but people aren't actually addressing that desperate situation. They are instead adding surveillance on top of the desperate situation, which from my perspective is not the solution.
Are there any more questions from council? Grace?
Thanks. Just want to say thank you for the presentation, and real quickly ask to clarify, because you're saying the issue in the story you shared was that while you and your family were out hiking or whatnot, someone switched the license plates on your vehicle and didn't realize that until you were driving and got stopped for it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
James, did you have something? Okay. Well, Mr. Norris, again, thank you for sharing your story and your experiences over in Oakland. And we appreciate the good work you do over there, and are setting the sort of model for other cities. So thank you.
Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know these are difficult conversations, so I appreciate you all really hearing from the community. Thank you so much.
Have a good night. Okay, so the next, we'll move on to public input. If you'd like to speak during public input, please raise your virtual hand and you'll get 4 minutes to speak. We'll start with Carol Ammons.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair of this Committee of the Whole. To the City Council and all of its members, and to the public, I appreciate the opportunity to come this evening. I was unable to attend the public meeting that was held last week as we were in session. Part of our session that I wanted to speak to tonight, I did provide letters to all of the council members in both the City of Champaign and the City of Urbana around the proposal to adopt license plate readers. I want to share with you all, and I really appreciate Mr. Norris from the Ella Baker Center, which I've followed their work and done much of the reforms at the state level that they had proposed in the past. But something that he said really stuck out to me. And the quote that he said was, "Trail them, nail them, jail them." We can follow this course of action over and over again, as we've seen this kind of proposal from the 1960s race riots that really are in response to the lack of investment in Black and Brown communities. But we've also seen it in the 80s, and we saw it in the 90s when mass incarceration began to grow uncontrollably, as it was demonstrated by Dr. Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow. I wanted to also highlight for you all a couple of other things in the book, Locking Up Our Own. Some of my colleagues that are in the Congress were at the state legislative level in the 1990s when the crime bill was proposed by Bill Clinton and the Clinton administration at the time. And today, many of whom have already, including President Clinton, repented for their short-sightedness, if you will, in passing the crime bill that was intentionally designed to, as the Ella Baker Center said, trail them, nail them, jail them. And we've seen these kind of proposals happen over and over again. And so what I wanted to do is to share with you all as council members that I highly encourage you to get the book, Locking Up Our Own, where many of our congresspersons today really saw the error of their ways in 1975 and 1980 and up to 2014, where they all repented for the harm inflicted on the Black community and the criminology that came as a result of poverty. And I wanted to read a quick quote from the book. It says, "Each of these changes, policy changes, was destructive enough individually, but their cumulative impact on the Black community was devastating. Warrior and pretext policing led to more arrests. Technological changes made the arrests impossible to escape, and legal changes turned a single arrest into a life of exclusion and subordination." And we do know already that we've spent a lot of money on policing as we look at police budgets grow over and over again, instead of investing the dollars directly into human resource areas that are currently lacking. Today, the governor of the state of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, and many of my colleagues participated in his public presentation today that declared gun violence as a public health crisis and pledged $250 million investment for hardest hit communities. And as a member representing Champaign-Urbana, I worked with the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to make sure that Champaign-Urbana was part of the original communities that will be a part of that dissemination of investment. But that investment is not for us to invest into surveillance technology or any other processes that are going to continue to over-police Black communities like the license plate readers. That investment is specifically being done so that we can invest into high-risk youth intervention, violence prevention services, youth development programs, and trauma recovery services for members of our community. We have advocated also for an Office of Violence Prevention, of which we established at the state level, that will fund resources in communities that are interested in establishing additional offices on the community level for the Office of Violence Prevention. If the City of Urbana and the City of Champaign are interested in working on a public health solution to gun violence, that is the direction that the state is going in, that is the direction that our office is going in, and we do hope that this is the direction that the city of Urbana will go in. I, as a mother of two.
Emmons, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Madam Chair, in just 30 seconds and I'll conclude. Thank you, ma'am. As a member and a mother in Urbana, I've lived here for 25 years. I have two African-American sons. One of them has been recently a victim of gun violence. He was robbed at gunpoint. His car was stolen. All of his personal belongings were stolen. He could have tried to defend himself, but he made the right decision because he understood that the response of these young men who robbed him was because they didn't have access to the resources that my son was lucky to have. And so I would hope that we would take that in consideration and find ways to invest into the families' lives as opposed to continuing the string of incarceral nation that we've become. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the council.
Thank you. Next, we have Alan Max Axelrod.
I'll preface by saying I actually agree with everything Carol Lam has said. So for years, I've been watching upper middle class folks tell our community how to end violence. For years, I've been watching upper middle class folks call for study after study to tell people what's already been proven, as it was in countries like Brazil, Venezuela, Cuba, Vietnam, China, Bolivia, most of Europe, and at one time Egypt, in some cases literally generations ago. To those pushing this data-starved effort, have any of you struggled to pay rent or utilities? Have you heard couples shouting, "Where's my money?" in the middle of the night? Have you stood literally between a landlord and a single mother? Have you brought a child who was sexually assaulted by a brother's friends to races so that she'd know where to get help on her terms? Have you helped a person get her Section 8 voucher restored after it was improperly taken away? Have you helped members of your community with rides to work, mentoring programs, or daycare because they are so underserved by a bus system that runs every 30 minutes if you're lucky because they don't live on a campus route? Have you gone to a person's home, talked to their parents about their abusive dynamics before independently housing the person until they could independently live for the first time since they were robbed at gunpoint? Have you been told by a person at risk of dying by suicide that you've saved their life? With all due respect, you do not have the support you need to process your comparatively privileged generational trauma without compounding harm to vulnerable households whose experiences you can only say to understand, but in reality you don't. I at least hope that someday you care to learn. What you have presented are corporation-provided statistics, which, if I was correct only 99% of the time, I'd be called unreliable by cynical politicians in this community. The corporate statistics have also been presented in isolation, lacking external verification, and with brittle technology that can be defeated by not only rain and fog, but also seemingly benign marker blotches that don't affect human readability of the license plate. There are no practical performance guarantees of the neural networks upon which this technology is based. There's a set of research called adversarial learning that was started after showing how a guitar can be confused by a cat with nothing more than a few pixel adjustments that are nearly undetectable to the human eye. So you want me to believe that community members would not have small Sharpie marks on their license plate readers, on their license plates to defeat this thing? That's literally all it takes. How are you to know if a child put a few dots on their family car's license plate or if someone did it to avoid detection? What are you going to do? Arrest people for distributing markers at a Black neighborhood's back to school drive for obstruction of justice? The Urbana police will be using these just as you would be using surveillance cameras in that circumstance, as Cherise said, by the way, and that's realistically all this is. This whole thing has been so tragically blind that I'm at least relieved that this is on the public record, and for that I thank you most deeply. In the footage, you can see the gaslighting by our public officials on full display. I will be distributing that footage as my bandwidth allows, and it would be in violation of the Open Meetings Act if the city were to take them down. I've already downloaded them, so it'd be just another example of the lack of integrity present by officials in this community, which we are showing our young people. The reasons that others are soft-spoken is because of the cynical political calculus relying on the upper middle class to win primary elections. That is not a concern of mine because the upper middle class holds a disproportionate amount of power to the detriment of marginalized people's lives. I'm here to tell you, if you do this, then the change that I want to see in the community will come faster. It's called accelerationism, and I don't want it like that. If you don't want that to happen, then don't enact this policy, and maybe you'll live out the rest of your comparatively more comfortable lives with your class remaining in power. The town halls were a sham, but I want to thank the people who took the pain to go. During the town halls, white anti-racists were specifically called out, which is simultaneously erasure of Black and brown members and a classic abusive strategy with a convenient other. You know where we white and Black anti-racists were instead? Canvassing homes at risk of eviction. The increases in crime coincide with the increased housing insecurity and financial precarity during this pandemic, as the previous presenter had said. Your own crime statistics show that the significant increase in crime was in 2020 and 2021. Also, I will express this as politely as I can without naming the culprit, but don't you dare yell at Reverend Dr. Evelyn again. I wish that you could express even 1,000% of the integrity that drives her activism. And since I have some time, not to mention that the Midwest, along with the Northeast, has among the most severe continued segregation, according to Governing Magazine's January 14th, 2019 article. It specifically mentions Champaign-Urbana. It says, Segregated in the Heartland, an investigative series where they noted a lack of progress. Levels of segregation within the Champaign-Urbana, Danville, Peoria, and areas have remained essentially unchanged since the 1980s, counter to national prevailing narratives. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next up, Donald Owen.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Chair. I come before you tonight to urge you not to vote to spend tax dollars for the purchase and implementation of automatic license plate readers, ALPRs. ALPRs are not the best option for reducing gun violence. You're investing our community limited tax dollars in over-policing Black, brown, and low-income communities. That is not the Urbana way. ALPRs have no evidence of reducing gun crimes or violence in any community in which they've been implemented. I ask you all to answer this question for yourselves and for your constituents. How do APLs support the core values of the City Council and of this community? If you can't answer that question, then you should not even be considering this vote tonight until you have done your internal research and your external research. We are sitting here in Urbana in the front yard of a top-tier public land-grant university that is known for being one of the best research institutions in the country. We value research and evidence. Spending money on tools that have no research-based evidence is not the Urbana way. Finally, and most importantly, I would like to address some misinformation about ALPR data and the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. I understand that at public forums last week, it was stated that ALPR data is not subject to FOIA. That statement is not a statement based in legislation. It might be a legal opinion of one of the attorneys that the city employs. ALPR data is not exempt from FOIA. There's currently Senate Bill 1540, which is sitting in assignments. The text of that bill specifically exempts ALPR data from FOIA. As some of you know, I work with attorneys and organizations all across the state using the powerful FOIA rules in Illinois to obtain information for individuals, organizations, and sometimes even the public good. And I think all of you know that I used to be in a position that caused me to be the frequent subject of numerous FOIAs. I know quite a bit about FOIA law, procedures, and appeals. If you vote in favor of spending our limited tax dollars to purchase and install ALPRs before the data that LPRs collect is exempt from FOIA, that is before SB 1540 is law, you will be spending even more of our limited tax dollars responding to and defending the appeals that will definitely happen when you deny FOIA requests about APL data. These requests will come from all types of groups and individuals. Spending money that inadvertently creates more spending is also not the Urbana way. Please do not vote to support the purchase and implementation of ALPRs. Instead, please take a moment to assess your individual and community core values. Research evidence-based solutions to community violence and gun violence. Mr. Norris, who presented earlier, gave us some great examples of these types of preventative programs. I look forward to engaging in a real discussion about spending our tax dollars on solutions and preventions that will not over-police Black and brown and historically marginalized communities. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you. Next, we have Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, hi, I'm Tracy Chong. I attended both automated license plate readers, ALPR town halls, and I have to say I was not surprised to see that it was more of a session where opposing views were dismissed by downplaying, omitting facts, and presenting misinformation, and where most of the time was used by city staff and the police department to talk about ALPRs in a way that downplayed the problems with ALPRs. And public input from the public was left to the very end. And I have to say that the hostility towards the public who were critical of ALPRs was very alarming. It was so inappropriate for Councilwoman Sharice Hersey to storm up to the front and grab the mic and berate members of the public for concerns about ALPRs. And then she was backed up by Mayor Marilyn. Quite unbelievable. I also have a comment about the Eagle View surveillance and imagery of Urbana, which includes residential properties that City Council just approved during the Cunningham Township meeting. There seemed to be a discrepancy about usage. Wayne Williams at one point said it only takes images that will be used to measure buildings. And then there was some mention about being able to see what materials were used. And then Harris mentioned others being able to go in the office and be trained and use it. And the example he gave was of a police officer being able to access the data. And then he also downplayed the invasiveness of this surveillance, saying it was as good as Google Maps. This is not true. You cannot see what materials are used in Google Maps. And from Eagle View's website, they're definitely touting the superiority compared to Google Maps. So that's kind of dishonest. And yet, you guys, City Council vote to allow Township to use this rather invasive technology without understanding it. And this seems to be happening. It seems to be a trend from you guys. The most you seem to be able to do is ask for a policy. When will you realize that asking for a policy is not the same as actually thinking critically? When will you learn that a policy is useless if it's not enforced, if it's enforced selectively, and if the policy can be modified at will? The same thing is happening with the ALPRs. Your suggestions all assume a functional, transparent, and accountable government. But the past has shown us over and over again that Urbana leadership and the police department have no regards for policy and accountability. So you guys are basically useless by just recommending policies. Next, I want to bring your attention to the review of the February 6th taser discharge incident. This is the taser incident again, where Deputy Chief Searle suppressed the squad cam video footage. After the new evidence showed officer misconduct was produced 10 months after much prodding by the public, Urbana Police, with help from City Administrator Carol Mitten, has been doing everything that they can to not have this review. The CPRB meeting last Wednesday was the third time this review had been scheduled, but somehow did not happen. After UPD did not show up for the second review, Carol Mitten promised CPRB that she would make sure that someone from UPD would show up for last Wednesday's review. Well, Carol Mitten did keep her promise, but Deputy Police Chief Searle showed up. But when CPRB wanted to do the review, Deputy Police Chief Searle said that he was not prepared to do the review. That was such a joke. This review has been delayed for about a year by the police, and Carol Mitten has even forbidden CPRB from voting on improper taser usage if the review were ever to happen. So I think we've been saying this over and over again. Are you guys going to look into it? Thank you.
Next up is Christopher Hansen.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm wondering why the City Council continues to appoint government officials who frequently engage in misconduct, and then you just basically ignore it when that misconduct becomes flagrant and arrogant. I just don't understand it, and if you just don't care, I'd rather you tell us so that we stop wasting our time. When the taser ordinance was written and added into the CPRB ordinance, there was policy implemented that said every taser gun needed to have a camera on it so that it would record every interaction. That was written into the policy. We have a taser ordinance that says every taser on holstering has to be reviewed. But in 2019, in July, Rich Searle said that the Urbana Police Department just decided they weren't doing cameras on their tasers anymore. And they just decided that independently. They didn't ask this council about it. They didn't ask the CPRB. They just did whatever they wanted to do, even though that was the agreement. Then in September of 2019, Rich Searle was complaining about doing the taser reviews, and so they stopped doing taser reviews on every taser usage. CPRB ordinance is very, very, very clear. The taser comes out of the holster, it gets reviewed by the CPRB, period. That's the city ordinance. The CPRB members nor Deputy Chief Searles, they can't just decide they're not going to do that anymore. And that's what they did. And this was over 2 years ago. They just decided we're not doing TASER reviews anymore. They do, I think they've done like one per year since then. And Richard Searles gets to choose which ones they do. So, I mean, they're just flagrantly violating our police oversight mechanisms, and we have very few to begin with. And this council has been made aware of this. I've made you aware of it for the last 2.5 years. I know some of you haven't been here that long, but all of you have been made aware of this. And no one's done anything about it. And so that's why it's such a huge joke when you talk about, let's have a policy for this or that, because even when you have policies and even when they're written into ordinance and they're just flagrantly broken and violated, no one does anything. You just don't care. You don't even respond. So it's so funny what you're talking about ALPRs and you want to have a policy for them. And it's the members of the public who are well informed and have interacted with your appointed staff people realize how much of a joke this is. And this town hall, which it was so hostile and silly. I don't understand why you hold those things. Why don't you have a real communication session with the public? I'd like to know why no one has mentioned that the UPD wanted mobile ALPRs for parking enforcement. And that was funded to the tune of $57,000 in June of 2020. Over a year ago, you guys funded this. Why do I keep hearing Chief Seraphin say that they never considered ALPRs until the community demanded them? That can't possibly be true if the council already funded an ALPR system more than a year ago. That's a lie. Why don't we talk about this? I pointed it out several times. When you bring up UPD policy for ALPRs, you have no say. And the chief can change the policy anytime he wants on a whim. That's how it works. He's changed 1 or 2 dozen policy sections in the UPD manual in the past year without any input or vote from city council. Whatever you think, whatever notions you have in your head about a police policy when it comes to ALPRs or anything else is complete imagination land nonsense. You do not get a say, you do not get a vote. The chief can change it whenever he wants, and it doesn't even matter because it won't be enforced. So I think you should ask your legal counsel, ask the police chief if he's here, what is the mechanism for changing police policy? And the answer is, he'll say it very carefully, the answer is whenever he wants. So I just don't understand why you're talking about a policy that you don't control, you can't enforce, and will be changed without asking you. If you want a policy, you have to actually write it into ordinance and get an outside party to enforce it. And you won't do that. I don't know why. Thanks.
Next, we'll have Teresa Mickelson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm speaking in favor of the City of Urbana using ALPRs for a year to see what information can be obtained that may help address the rising gun violence in our community. I understand that this is a tool that is reactive, not proactive, but it is a tool whose use we should explore. The Brennan Center for Justice has a position paper that contains recommendations to increase transparency and accountability when ALPRs are used. The recommended oversight would require such things as verification of hot list data and instituting a 2-step scanning process. Of course, the technology should not be used without proper oversight. The idea that all available funds should be spent on anti-gun violence programs is not sensible. Gun violence is not going to go away the minute an anti-gun violence program is initiated. We also need tools to help find those who are responsible for the shootings and murders. ALPRs are one tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is DSA line 19.
Apologies there. I guess I was logged into the wrong account. Hi, my name is Brandy McCoy. I'm Urbana resident and co-chair of CUDSA. I would like to comment again in opposition of LPRs in Urbana. LPRs are not intended to prevent violent crime, right? But we face a gun violence issue in our community, and in a scramble to do something about it, we've come upon this resolution. With other communities in our region turning to similar measures for similar reasons, one might think it makes sense that we would follow suit. But when you really think about it, what do LPRs do? They may, with questionable rates of success, aid in catching the bad guys. This is something I've heard discussed among council members as well, that we need to catch the bad guys and that LPRs will help us do that. But as Mr. Norris highlighted, and I want to thank him for his presentation if he's still in this meeting, but as he highlighted, gun violence is more than a bad guy issue. We need to recognize the connection poverty and depravity has to violent crime and address the root causes of the problem. I ask that council not act for the sake of acting by taking examples around us. Let's innovate ways to reduce poverty in our community and lead our region in reducing violent crime along with it. LPRs are the LPRs are a non-solution to the problem that we're talking about them for. Why not take that $50K that the police apparently don't need for anything else and distribute it to build and bolster social services and community organizations intended to lift people from poverty and actually make the impact that we all want to see, which is less violent crime. It's not a quick, easy solution. The results will not come immediately, but with continued focus and funding, they will come. Contrary to the endless list of bad guys the LPRs might give us. Doing something for the sake of not doing nothing will get us nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Eddie Pratt Jr.
Good evening, Eddie Pratt Jr., resident of Urbana, DSA membership coordinator. I don't mind being loud about that. I call in tonight to speak in opposition to what you are thinking about doing with this whole LPR situation. Now, the stats and data that would suggest that this is a erroneous path are well and documented. So instead of beating a dead horse, I will give you some little bit of food for thought about what exactly you are about to set apart into this community. There are people in this community who are, as you would say, advocates or activists who have made their voices known and who have also suffered retribution from the police. Let me be clear. The police supporters, police organizations have retaliated against community members in this community within the last calendar year. And you are proposing that as a deterrent to gun violence, that you will give these people, these same people who at a city council meeting earlier this year said out loud in a foyer full of police officers on city property, cops gun thirsty, an illicit threat of violence against a community member simply because they did not like them. That's all. Then we have another advocate, a Black and brown advocate who was retaliated against by police. They tried to take this person's livelihood. They tried to take their job. They pressured, they showed up to their residence unannounced in this community in the last calendar year. We're talking about the same people who stalked a Black and brown activist online and then organized an anti-action against that particular citizen, to the fact that a municipal police car came through to intimidate in this community in the past year. You are putting people literally in danger. And I'm not saying that it will happen, but what I will say is there is no checks and balances in place to stop it from happening. And if history bears the receipts as it does, it's not looking too good. Otherwise than that, I was present at your town hall, in which on your own slides, it says that it's not going to be a deterrence to gun violence. So otherwise than surveilling and controlling the Black populace, I am completely confused as to the real purpose of why you're doing this to us. Good night.
Thank you. Next, we have Julie Watkins.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make public input. And I want to thank the presenters and other public input for much good information. I had been attempting to listen to the town hall videos and wasn't finding on the city YouTube channel, and I had to call today to get help, and then the links weren't live for me, and I had to have the direct links emailed to me. So I only got a chance to listen to parts of it. But between that and all the comments in previous council Zooms, it's clear to me that there isn't a consensus. I think certain people have unrealistic expectations. The only guarantee, I think, in all of this is that Flock would make a profit. So that would be a win-win for them. In the face of so many questions and a lack of consensus, even within the communities most affected, I'm disappointed that several people have made the decision and seem to be determined that this trial should happen, and are not reconsidering when so many concerns and counter evidence has been brought to them. When there is this lack of support and questions that have not been answered, or answered by saying, well, we don't know, that's why it's a trial. To many of the questions, that's not an adequate response. I hope you will not move forward without better agreement that this is a good use of city funds, and that it's the best use of the funds. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, Emmett Sanders.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you and good evening. I'm going to speak just a bit about why I oppose licensed readers in the community. And I have 4 reasons. So firstly, there are a lot of claims out there that LPRs are effective in reducing crime. The company says, in fact, that they aim to reduce crime by 25% over the next 3 years. And they also say that it reduces crime 70%. But when you look a little bit closer, you see this numbers because 70% of the crime is involved in a vehicle. So the assumption here is that they prevent 100% of the crimes related to vehicles, which clearly don't stay. And the problem with a lot of these claims are they're unsubstantiated. There's no empirical data showing these devices actually do what they say they do. There's testimony and there's anecdotal evidence, but correlation isn't causation. And none of this is evidence-based. In fact, a number of experts have noted that there were many factors that could have contributed to that reduction. Secondly, while there isn't empirical evidence these things do what they purport to do, there is story after story of people being misidentified by plate readers. We know that communities of color are continuously over-policed and under-resourced. We know that these conditions often exacerbate crime rates in these communities, and that it is in these very communities that false solutions such as LPR show up. And though these things are depicted as objective solutions because they monitor license plates instead of faces, when they're heavily placed in communities of color, that objectivity goes out of the window. So by this logic alone, the people who are most likely to be identified by automatic license plate readers and stopped by the police as a result are people of color. We know as well that Black folks are far more likely to experience profiling and escalation and are already at more risk for misidentification. And this just offers one more avenue through which that escalation and misidentification can happen. Thirdly, we should consider the fact that there are no laws or restrictions in the law when it comes to the regulation of data or the usage of ALPRs. There's nothing to compel them to assess their own technology, nothing that requires them to note misidentifications and police engagement. It comes about as a result of a misread or a malfunction. It's been reported that up to 1 in 10 reads is incorrect. There have not only been multiple Fourth Amendment challenges to the constitutionality of ALPRs, but there have been successful lawsuits against cities from victims of license plate reader malfunctions, which is something that I think we also need to consider. Finally, I know things are scary and this looks like a quick and effective solution and everyone wants safety, but the simple truth of the matter is that this is not a problem with a quick and easy answer. There are deep systemic issues at work here that require actual solutions. If we look at depression rates all over the country have tripled since the pandemic, and young people represent more than half of that increase. We look at the increase in food and housing instability. People can't pay their rent. Not to mention the continued over-criminalization of young Black men in particular. People need help. They need resources and they need hope. And we can't do this if we're focused on continuing the same carceral practices in the hopes of looking for a quick fix. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Ben Theobald.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can.
Okay, I'm ready to speak. Hi, I'm here to speak out against the having ALPRs here in the city of Urbana. In 2015, even though the Illinois House passed legislation in the 75-24 to regulate cameras, the bill died in the Senate without being brought to a vote. So I find it very concerning that we're going to have a technology that hasn't even been regulated, and we're just going to assume on good faith. And I went to the town hall, and I feel like this is just kind of a kind of money giveaway to these companies, private companies. I know they say, oh, they don't do anything with the information. That's kind of hard to buy, considering and as that has been mentioned before, there have been faulty issues with these license plate readers. And again, as has been mentioned, it's they usually racially profile Black and brown folks, and I don't find this something and this is something that I understand that there has been an increase in gun violence in this past year. Well, what has happened in the last past year? We went through a very tough pandemic, and a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their homes and possibly had their lives altered for the rest. Poverty and crime go hand in hand, unfortunately. I've seen these ALPRs in my home, well, not my hometown, but in my area in St. Louis. I've seen them really doing much other than, as I mentioned, just an entity, a corporate buyout, and just an easy, maybe you'll get a few arrests, but long term, what will we have to show? I mean, a year from now, what if we get a couple more arrests, but crime has gone down? And that, as I've mentioned before, and was even mentioned in the town hall, that this wouldn't necessarily be a crime reduction. So I don't understand what's the point. I don't understand. This is just, reaction instead of actually coming together and finding a solution. But yes, I would highly advise to vote against having automatic license plate readers. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phyllis, I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm going to be speaking as a resident in Ward 3, okay, not the city clerk now. I am hearing all of these comments of people that's talking against the readers. I have not heard not one comment as to what someone has to offer that's going to be of any significance on trying to get this together. Our kids are killing each other. These aren't old people. These are young people killing each other. We teach by acceptance. If we accept the fact by not paying or not passing this resolution or whatever it is, this amendment, what we're saying is, okay, go ahead, shoot up what you want to shoot up, as long as you stay in the area that you're in, because we don't need you anywhere else. So I'm safe in my spot. But you go ahead on in Ward 3 and you blow that bad boy right up. Shoot everything. I live in Ward 3. I fear for my grandchildren that have to walk to school from my house every morning because I'm not sure if I'm going to see them in the evening with the way these people are riding around shooting one another. You guys are always talking about how Black and brown lives matter. If you don't do something to get something started, which would be those readers so we can see where things are going, then what you're saying is Black and brown lives really don't matter because, it's not in my area. So, I'll do everything that I can to see to it that it stays where it's at. You guys are here for legislation. Everybody that has called here, except for one person today, says that they are against it. How many live in Ward 3? Can't be very many. So fine, give me something that you think is going to be able to keep you safe because you want to not do anything to make me safe over here. I don't like it. It's unnecessary. And if you all really care about what's going on around us and in this community, you're talking to everybody. Have you talked to anybody in the Black community as to what we feel about this? I mean, Sharice and Linda brought the stuff forward. I'd rather have the cameras instead of the readers, to tell you the honest truth. That's what I would like to see. But oh no, you all have disregarded what Sharice, who is your counterpart on that board, what she said doesn't matter. What Linda said doesn't matter because, it don't meet what it is that you think is the right thing to be doing here. Think about it. What would you do if they were shooting in your neighborhood? Would you want something there or would you want to leave it carte blanche the way that it is? Don't care, don't do nothing. We're just going to let it ride out. We've had so many committees. We've had so many groups meeting to try and come up with things that's going to work. Nothing works. We meet till we're blue in the face. We come up with nothing for it. It's time now to do something. Yeah, it's just a minor thing, but the fact of the matter is it's a minor thing that could help somebody's child not be killed tonight. All I'm saying is do what you're supposed to do as legislators. You're supposed to be about the business of doing what your constituents put you here to do. And that is to look out for our safety and our welfare and to do what it is that we would like for you to do when we bring something to you, which is what Sharice and Linda did. And you all have just plain disregarded that. I find that to be disgraceful and to not be anything but blowing smoke up somebody's skirt. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So we're at an hour for public input. I'd entertain a motion to end it so we get through the rest of the people.
I'd make that motion to extend the meeting. I mean, the public comment.
Do you have a recommendation for how long, or just until all the hands are gone, or?
I'm open. I think
I would recommend 20 minutes. 20 minutes will get you through the next floor.
I have some letters that need to be read too, but I think we can still get through it.
So maybe 30 minutes to get the reading?
Sure.
Okay.
Is that Mary Alice, is that your second?
Sure. I'll need a second.
Thanks, Mary Alice.
Clerk, can you call the roll on that?
Yes, yes, I will. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Public input extended 30 minutes to 9:40. Next up is Sarah Nixon.
Hello, City Council. I attended virtually the town halls that were convened to convince the public that ALPRs are good for them, critically needed to solve gun violence. And I heard many voices. I heard white Urbana say no resoundingly, but the voices that moved me the most were those from the Black community. I heard Eddie Pratt Jr. and Rita Connerly make logical arguments against ALPRs, but I also heard Linda Turnbull express that she has a problem with nobody speaking up. And calling for the city to quote unquote keep us safe. And I heard Ms. Turnbull express how traumatized she is, as is the entire African American community. I also heard Dr. Reverend Evelyn Underwood, who also expressed being traumatized and exhausted, but who called for safeguards and reminded the city that there are other ways to combat gun violence. For example, something I think called shot block that identifies where the shot came from. I heard Minnie Pearson lament that nobody has been offering solutions, and she's right, and that's a shameful failure, I think. And I think Ms. Pearson is absolutely right too when she alludes to the quote of "first they came for my neighbor." In other words, white Urbana did not speak up loud enough until they felt like their civil rights were threatened. So we have a chaotic, mixed outcry from Black and white community voices. And the white civil rights cry or outcry rings hollow for Minnie Pearson and so many other members of the African American community. So that's a key thing that I took away, is that Caucasian residents, myself included, are warning against civil rights violations, but Urbana's African American community in some very key ways do not have the luxury of being concerned about civil rights when they're, and this is my interjection, but their civil rights leaders in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and well before that were silenced, imprisoned, or assassinated. So much for their brave community leaders speaking up and standing up for Black folks' civil liberties. What they're asking for today here is bodily safety, their right to life. And then we can look at civil liberties or civil rights. At the town hall meeting, I also heard, I think, the name was Maurice Hayes from Neighborhood Transformation, asked the million-dollar question: are we making any human investment in these hotspots where the cameras will be? Are we trying to find ways to get the community more involved instead of relying on technology? Not too long ago, the council also heard from First Followers. They had a presentation that addressed those exact questions. I realize I'm out of time, so I want to say, as my last note, I've just ordered the book Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America by James Foreman Jr. that was recommended by Carol Ammons. If I can find it online secondhand and order it for $1.25 plus shipping, Mayor Marlin, you can too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Kilgore.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss the license plate readers. I'm appearing here tonight, unlike usual when I'm part of First Followers. I'm appearing here in my capacity as the director of Challenging Ecarceration, a project of Media Justice. Media Justice is a national nonprofit organization which focuses on the impact of technology and media on racial justice. We do education, research, and organize campaigns at the national level and in support of local efforts. We would work with organizations like the Ella Baker Center, and I want to thank Zach Norris for appearing here tonight. I've been with Media Justice since 2017, directing a project which focuses largely on the impact of electronic monitoring on the criminal legal system, but I've also researched other surveillance technologies like automated license plate readers, which I refer to as ecarceration. I've also written a book on this topic called Understanding Ecarceration, which will be published by the New Press in January of 2022. My research and study of these technologies have taught me some lessons about these devices. Perhaps the most important is that there is little real evidence that proves they are effective. Whether it is license plate readers or ankle monitors, the purveyors of these devices make claims about their capacity to reduce crime and contribute to peaceful communities without conducting any serious research or analysis. As they have done in Urbana, they send a sales rep who makes promises, provides anecdotes of success, and alleges that these devices can solve a very serious problem like community violence. They offer to scatter these devices across the so-called hotspots and wait to grab the first license plate on the hot list to show the value of their product. They do nothing to create a framework for assessing success, use no proven research methods such as control groups to show that the license plate reader is the cause of a drop in crime or homicides. They wait for stories and pretend that they are real data. Since very understandably, decision makers are often in a hurry to produce results, they all too often agree. Let's not allow this to happen in Urbana. The other things about these devices are, as people have mentioned, that they reproduce racial bias. We know that in Urbana, there's a history of racial profiling of Black drivers, disproportionate stopping of Black drivers, and automated license plate readers are only going to increase this. I don't think this makes the situation where we either adopt the license plate readers or we do nothing. What we need to acknowledge is that for years this problem has gone on and we haven't devoted serious analysis and research to this. And now we're bringing in a technology that really represents a quick fix, not really a serious undertaking to deal with this violence. So if the city council wants to address the issue of violence, we need to employ the vast resources of unbiased researchers from the University of Illinois. We need programs that address the structural racism and inequality that underpin community violence. We don't need quick fix solutions that create false hopes and leave the fundamental structures of inequity untouched while doing nothing to address the trauma of violence. We need solutions based on healing, public health, and building relationships, not devices of incarceration. As Zach Norris reminded us, if you want safety, you need to invest in people, not surveillance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a phone number ending in 2435.
Good evening. This is Eldris Melinda Carr, and I'd like to say good evening to all to Mayor and Mayor Marlin and all the council members and all those who have spoken tonight. I am a resident of Ward 3, Dr. Ellis subdivision in particular. My heart goes out to and prayers to all the families who have experienced violence through gun violence and killed, a loved one being killed, even the recent ones of whom are, close people that I know. I'm concerned about the fact that the 403 Ward 3 residents, I wasn't one who signed a petition because I wasn't available at the time. They requested not the ALPR, but the petition, as has been stated, they requested installation of CCTV cameras along with supporting aspects, increased lighting, clear lines of sight, security personnel 24/7 to manage cameras to be placed ASAP in the high crime areas of Urbana. One thing that I had mentioned, and I spoke at the town hall, is that, if this was going to be done, of course, that's not our first choice. We know things have gotten really rough in our community, that it would not be done just in the Black and brown areas. And since, it's high crime, we know that that targets the Black and brown areas. And so if this equipment, the cameras are going to say conduct audits to, try to see if they're going to be disparate, impact on our Black and brown communities. We're already starting out with the Black and brown community. So we're already doing what we really don't want to do. That's not really what we should be doing. I wanted to mention that there's also a bill that's supposed to be passed or supposed to be in effect January 1st, 2022. And it's related to the fact that Illinois has become the first state to ban police from lying to minors. And Governor Pritzker signed this bill. It prohibits the use of deceptive tactics, by all law enforcement when interrogating a minor. So if this is a bill that needs to be signed at the state level, we know it's happening all over Illinois. And so that's something that we have to deal with. I've heard things in the community with some of the things that have happened where people that have been involved in things have been, felt like they were falsely accused of something. And sometimes they're afraid to, they give a false confession because they're afraid. So we have to deal with that. That's been happening at the state level. And I'm going back to the camera issue. Some of us in our area have either a doorbell or something like that. And I think that if we did something like I think my alderman talked about a neighborhood watch, that we could come together. I would be willing to provide a private one for someone, that we can come together as neighborhoods to watch out for one another. And we're already doing it in my area. We call one another when something's happening to check on one another. So that's what we have to do. There are people that are coming forward as witnesses and saying things that are happening. I know people are fearful, but there are people who are coming forward. I have witnessed some things, that have happened, not really related to violence in particular, but I just wanted to add that there are other alternatives that we can do privately as a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Angel Johnson.
Hello, good evening to the whole city council board. I am really tired as a resident of Urbana. First, we was cheated out of getting, or racial profile, I should say. I have been trying to get a youth center in this community for everyone to come together under one umbrella. It could be First Followers, it could be HVNT, it could be Angels Youth Center, it could be Neighborhood Connection Center. We deal with youth every day. I have knocks on my door at night. My husband and I get up, pray for the people that knock on our door, and we cover those young people up. They have nowhere to go, no one to talk to. When you're dealing with youth, you must connect with the youth leaders in your community. I want to say that. It's not that we're not coming up with solutions. Everyone coming up with solutions, but no one want to put the money behind youth. I'm a nonprofit organization. 2014, if you go back to the city council, we represented, we came, we did a proposal for the Angel Youth Center letter, and you guys stated that on the city council board, not you new people, you said that's a nonprofit 501c3, don't bring money to the community. So when the COVID hit, it drove us into opening up our restaurant, which we've been trying to open that up too. And Miss Phyllis will tell you, I was dealing with Brandon Boyd and never could get no bridge help, no monies, no nothing. Never been offered to me 2014, all the way up to 2021. I'm still dealing with the same thing, no funding. Okay, I have given funding to the youth in our community. I have given back to this community, period. I work hard. I meet people's needs. That's what we're supposed to do. I'm not gonna put the blame on anyone. Far as the license plate, no, I don't want them because I've been racial profiled. My husband, my daughter, we live East Urbana. Come on, they stop us all the time. And I'm tired of it. I don't trust you. I don't believe in that. You don't trust me. That's the problem. We need to come up with a solution where first off, we begin to see one another as a human being, not Black, not white, not Hispanic, not Chinese, to build the community. This is my thing. I need lights out here. I asked Mayor Marlin for lights, okay? This is November. We talked in September or maybe June, I don't know. But I know you said you was gonna get the lights between Rutledge and Lincolnwood on Florida. Right by Thomas Paine Elementary School, there was 2 shootings, 3 killings. Come on, what do you want? What do you want? Give us the money. Give each one of the organization $25,000 a piece. Not on my watch. Give him the money. Let's build a safe haven for these youth to change their minds. You have to change the mindset of a young person. They're young. They got time. They can change. Trust me. I know. I change lives every day. Put the money. Take the money and put the money where it needs to go and build one unit. All of us come together, work together, and let's stop this stuff. Stop it. The shooting will stop, but you gotta love first. You gotta give up the money. Give up the money.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Tanya Parker.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you so much. To the council, and I do thank everyone for the comments, honest comments today, because it was a lot of truth that was spoken today. My name is Tanya Parker. I'm publisher and founder of Unity in Action magazine, and I just want you guys to know that we are a resource in the community, and our goal is to help to amplify the work that so many awesome social service agencies are doing. We believe that we can affect people by addressing the mindset issue. And Angel Johnson was just on point when she brought it up. These kids need their mind changed about their approach to dealing with situations. It's not a fad, believe it or not, but it's being perpetuated through music to them that it is a fad to have a gun, to carry a gun. So we're working with folks, and we would love to work with more to help change the mindset. So we will be reaching out to council and other organizations, and some of you here have known some of the work that we've done. But I just want you guys to know that alternatively, we have other options. And as a community, if we have the resources, we can do even more. But I do oppose these license plate readers in our community. This is a cycle that we've been through before. A lot of these boys out here are, juvenile offenders that have been locked up, or people have been locked up a long time and got out and their mind ain't right. So we don't need to go through this cycle again. So I would hope that you would give us a chance as a community to try to continue to work on alternatives to addressing these issues. I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Kenitha Faye.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, thank you so much. Good evening to all. My name is Kenitha Faye, an Urbana citizen. After I heard the presentation and comments, I would like to offer a perspective as an Asian immigrant toward public safety. As an Asian female, we often label as submissive and quiet. Well, the truth is often we are quiet because no one cares to listen, and often we are discounted of what we said. So we just save everybody's time and just do not say anything. Well, that ends today. As an Asian female, I have my fair share of being stereotyped, mistreated by police while living on campus and while on the road. So when it comes to facing the police, I too have fear. I have fear, but my fear doesn't stop me from speaking up when I see other mothers asking for help. Many gun victims' mothers and families are asking for help, but no one is willing or able to help them. To me, both COVID-19 and gun violence have so many things in common. They both require immediate action. They both need short-term and long-term solutions. For COVID-19, we need to wear a mask and receive vaccine. For gun violence, we need an investigative tool and social programs. There is resistance to both. People claim that they have the right not to get vaccinated for COVID-19. People also do not want anyone to take picture of their license plate, which by design is already on public display. They both are emergency. They both affect life and our community, traumatize us. As a community, we might need to look back and see what all we can give to help the people that affected. You might not be shot or killed because you live in a very nice area. What about people who have fear? When, I'm sorry, but when Asian female got shot and killed in Atlanta, it affected us up here. We got together and we cried together. Please contact me if any elected official show up, because to my observation, 3 events that I went, there's nobody show up to support us. This situation require all of us. So please really look at this as it is. And I have to say that I don't care if you're gonna pass license plate or not. Why don't you tell us what you're gonna propose to pass? Because we need both investigative tool and programs. We already have programs, but we are bleeding. Programs doesn't stop the bleeding. So give us something to stop the bleeding, and then nurture the community so we can live peacefully together. We love you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jaya.
Great. I have a few different letters to read that were emailed. And then I didn't know if Professor Anita Chan wanted to share her letter for the committee of the whole meeting, but that was another one that was asked to be included in the record. But the first one I have is from Peggy Patton. And it states, hello, Urbana City Council and Mayor Marlin. I attended Friday's town hall meeting sponsored by the City of Urbana and the NAACP. I appreciate the information provided and the opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. I especially appreciate the attention to the various ways Urbana is working to address the serious gun violence plaguing our region. I had to leave before public comment period, so wish to share my position on ALPRs in this email. After hearing the support of ALPRs from the city and Minnie Pearson of the NAACP and reading numerous concerns voiced about this technology, I remain reluctant about the city's investment in ALPRs. My reluctance stems from 2 primary areas, both of which can be addressed by the city. One, a significant area of concerns over ALPRs has to do with mistrust of how they will be used. Articulated policies and verbal intentions only go so far. If the city moves ahead with ALPRs, I hope the city will put in place an oversight board that includes members of the community to regularly review the use of ALPRs. 2, a frequent statement made by the mayor, Ms. Pearson, and Chief Seraphin at Friday's town hall was that ALPRs are one tool to assist our police department in investigating gun violence. And if this technology leads to even minor reduction in gun violence, it will be sufficient. I disagree with that statement. Financial and human resources are finite. Any decision to adopt a new tool or new approach has trade-offs. Money spent on ALPRs is money not spent elsewhere. Staff time devoted to following ALPR leads is staff time not devoted to other known practices that help reduce gun violence. In parentheses, neighborhood support, housing and infrastructure development, et cetera, end parentheses. The question about whether ALPRs are worthy of the substantial investment of dollars and staff time is a valid question. I was disappointed that more information was not provided about the impact of ALPRs in other communities who've been using the technology for some time. Information from Flock is not reliable, and a single anecdote from the city of Joliet shared at Friday's town hall was not convincing. We should want to know if Rantoul, Danville, Decatur, Springfield, and Peoria believe their investment in ALPRs was worth it and why. Thank you for hosting last week's town hall meetings. Please reach out to the communities using ALPRs to learn more about their impact on gun violence reduction and share that information with us. And if the city adopts ALPRs, please set up a system of accountability to ensure that they're being used as intended. Thank you for your service to Urbana, Peggy Patton. The next one is from Robin and Ryan Fellers. It says, hello, Council Member Colasetti. As your constituents, we would like you to vote against any attempts to spend Urbana tax dollars on automatic license plate readers. They have not yet to show their usefulness and represent an extreme invasion of privacy and over-policing. Please do not allow them. The next is one that I believe probably a number of us received. I think I've received about 80 copies of this one, but I did have requests from specific individuals to read it into the record. It states, "Dear neighbor, I am opposed to the purchase of automatic license plate readers, ALPRs, by both the city of Urbana and the city of Champaign. I'm deeply concerned about escalating gun violence in my community, and I am concerned that ALPRs are a false solution and that purchasing them will divert resources into tools of surveillance instead of the resources and solutions we really need. We all want solutions to gun violence that will heal and support our communities. We need to reject ALPRs and continue to work towards result-driven solutions that are equitable, not harmful. Instead, I urge you to fund programs that address the root causes of local gun violence, poverty, inequality, fear, and lack of opportunity. In spite of both cities' commitments to data-driven solutions, you are considering investing in surveillance when those resources are urgently needed for healing and preventing more gun violence, like First Follower's solution-based approach to prevent gun violence that includes counseling, education, economic development, community outreach, and civic engagement. I urge you to consider the evidence against ALPRs and listen to the opposition to ALPRs growing in our community. Please read these important statements opposing by ALPRs from UCIMC, Smile Politely, and Champagne Showers, and join me in supporting safety and healing, not more surveillance and harm. Individuals who asked me to read that were Danielle McFarland, Matthew Soyland, Stacy Gloss, Rita Connerly, and Joyce Mast. And some of what was shared with me is that folks who had childcare to navigate weren't able to be here to make comments tonight. And then I have one more from Kelly Winkin. And that one says, I am opposed to the purchase of automatic license plate readers, ALPRs, by the city of Urbana. I urge the city council to heed the statements opposing ALPRs by many local entities, including the Ubuntu Project, UCIMC, Smile Politely, and Champagne Showers, and want to add my own concerns about surveillance, civil liberties, the accuracy of the technology, and the need to protect people of color from additional opportunities for failed interaction with law enforcement as a result of ALPR misuse or mistakes. I too am concerned about gun violence in our community, but to prevent it, we need to fund programs that actually address the causes of local gun violence. Those programs include, but are not limited to, funding counseling, mental health services, substance abuse treatment, as well as a local detox center, economic opportunities, community development, and especially education. Those are proven solutions for reducing gun violence and are much more worthy of my taxpayer dollars than ALPRs. The First Followers Community Violence Response Model is a good start. Please look at these solutions and vote against funding ALPRs. Thanks and best regard, Kelly Wiggin. That's the last one.
Okay, so we've reached our time for public input.
Chandra, do we have 3 minutes for one more letter? Was it 9:45 that we extended it to?
It was 9:40, but
okay, all right. Then I just asked that the council members read. There was another letter for public input from Bill Brown.
James, you have a question?
I have 2 letters as well for public input from constituents. I can also send them to the clerk for adding to the public record, but I'm curious how we decide which letters get read in and which we don't have time for.
JL?
I was just going to clarify that I read the ones that people asked me to read, but if there are ones that people have sent that they would like to be included, I'd be happy to make sure those are included in the record as well.
I mean, at this point, we voted to extend the time once. I don't know if we actually have the time to extend it again to read those, but they will be entered into the record. Yes, Sharice?
I just wanted to say I also have some letters, but I can forward these to Ms. Clark, I guess, for them to be entered into the record. Would that be a proper thing to do, Ms. Clark?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If everyone is fine with, just submitting those letters to the clerk to be entered into the record, we can move on. Pretty cool? Okay. Any staff reports?
I have two quick things, if I could. The first is that we have heard back from all the council members on the dates that we had offered you for the council priority and goal setting sessions. And the best we could do, and I don't want to make a decision for you, the best we could do is we have everybody on December 3rd, and we have everyone except Mary Alice on December 4th. So the question would be, and so initially we were talking about scheduling 2 sessions, and we can add on later if you find that you need it. But for that initial 2 sessions, I don't know if you want to proceed when everyone's not available.
Carol.
Sorry.
Yes,
the mayor's got her hand up.
I was just going to say, Diane talked to me today, and I can move some stuff. It's fine.
Oh, okay, great.
Except there is a disconnect on those dates. I was told it was December 2nd and December 3rd by Kate Levy.
Okay, wait a second.
Thursday and Friday, or are we talking Friday and Saturday?
Thursday and Friday.
Okay, so that's December 2nd.
Okay, my bad.
And then December 3rd.
Sorry about that. I wrote down the wrong thing.
And that means, and because Mary Alice has agreed to move her things around, that means everybody can be present at both sessions, which is great. And that would be 5:30 to 7:30, and we'll work out logistics. But put those dates in the calendar, please.
I had one more thing, unless you want to do that one, Mayor.
Go ahead. No.
Okay. For the equity and quality, there was a question about the equity and quality of life project, when we're going to start taking applications for that. And I think you know that I've been working with BPAC on that. And so at their November meeting, I'll be bringing the communications plan to them and getting any feedback, and then I can bring that to council, but we'll be looking for your assistance in getting the word out to get applications in. So I think by later this month, we'll be rolling that out. And that's what I have.
I have one thing.
Okay, Mayor.
And just to add a little bit more information on the announcement by the governor today, governor did declare that gun violence is a public health crisis. He announced a $250 million investment for hardest hit communities. They intend to start issuing notices of funding opportunities for qualified organizations before the end of 2021. And they're making competitive funding of $50 million available for fiscal year 22. And then $100 million available the next 2 years following that. Areas that they expect to focus on would be high-risk youth intervention programs, violence prevention services, youth development programs, and trauma recovery services. So the money will be distributed over a period of the next 2.5 years. And we don't have any additional details. This was just announced today, but the funding opportunities for qualified organizations are supposed to be announced before the end of 2021. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to ordinance number 2021-10-046, an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned real estate, 1407 Wiley Drive, 92-21-16-352-006, 809 South Glover Avenue, 92-21-16-181-007, 1811 East Florida Avenue, 92-21-16-481-061, and 1106 North Rice Street, 91-21-07, 2021-251-002. Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is an ordinance to authorize staff to auction 4 pieces of real estate that the city owns. We've owned these 4 parcels for a number of years. We've made no use of them, and staff sees no future use for these parcels. And so we're recommending that we sell them, remove them from the city's maintenance obligation, and put them back on the private tax rolls. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Mary Alice.
Thank you, Scott. I had a couple of questions about these parcels. So are any of these parcels kind of the standard 60-120 for building? Are they vacant lots? Are there houses on these?
3 are vacant lots. 1 has a house on it, a single family residence. It is not habitable. It does not have a certificate of occupancy. It's controlled by the Grants Management Division for housing purposes. They've determined that it does not fit their needs for their housing plans, and so have asked for it to be sold.
And have any of these parcels been offered to Habitat for Humanity?
That is an option that we always consider. This particular house that is not currently habitable, we may offer it to Habitat. I don't know that they're going to want it, but if in the event that they would want it, we could come back to council and have an updated ordinance that would convey the property to them. As you know, that's a practice the city likes to engage in. So the notion here is let's get these 4 set up for an auction in the event that we're not able to give that particular property to Habitat.
So just to summarize, you said 3 are vacant lots and 1 has an uninhabitable house?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Sharice.
Yeah, I noticed Scott on the pictures that the one on the one lot on, well, in my neighborhood on Wright Street, North Wright Street, is that lot big enough for a house? Because
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm asking this because what I noticed is that the lots, it seems like there's an alley that goes down the middle between Eads and Beach, and all the other homes seem to take up like the entire space. So that one space, the 1106, seems to be in back of 1411 Eads. I guess that's what it is. I don't know. And is that big enough for there to be any kind of dwelling, or have you thought about offering that to whoever owns the lot that it seems to be sitting on? Because everyone else's, what I noticed is that everyone else's property seems to take up, seems to be like pretty big lots compared to this little bitty square. So I was wondering if has there been any help, any idea of if you could offer that the owner of where that sits, that particular lot as well?
It is not buildable. It is not big enough to put a house on. At some point, for reasons lost in time, that was probably, those 2 lots you described were probably one lot, and some small parcel got pulled out, and somehow the city became the owner. We have looked into pursuing combining those lots back together, but the lot to the north, which it probably was parceled out of, is in probate. The owner passed away, and so it's pretty speculative whether on any reasonable timeline we might be able to put those back together. our thinking at the staff level is that we'll spend 6 or 9 months working on trying to contact the owners that are going to become the owners as this property moves from the possession of the deceased person to his heirs, and see if we can recombine those. Because as you're probably thinking, the lot doesn't have a lot of value. The one that we own doesn't have a lot of value on its own, and there is kind of an obvious common sense parcel to combine it with. And so we're going to pursue that for our intention is to pursue that for 6 to 9 months. And if we can't get it done, then we'll auction it and get it off of our rolls, get it into private hands, and let other folks deal with it as they may.
Enough for a garden, I mean, so that's why I was just noticing from the aerials how, it seems like that actually belongs with another lot. So
yeah.
Are you going, so my question then is, does it make sense for us to put that up for auction by itself?
So our intention is to take these four properties, and we're not going to auction them all at one time, but rather there's priorities. So I mentioned the house on Wiley. We're going to pursue seeing if Habitat is interested in that. If not, then auction this property on North Wright. We're going to pursue combining it back together with that lot to the north. So there's a one properly sized single family residence lot rather than one that's okay and one that's not usable. But if we can't make that happen, we'll dispossess ourselves of it. And so these aren't going to be all at once. They're going to be in series. The first lot we're going to auction is the 809 Glover Avenue. That's across the street from Public Works. That property was bought for future expansion of Public Works, but with the development of the facilities master plan, and other purchases, we ended up purchasing land to the north of Public Works on the same side of the street. With those two developments, that property across the street was determined to not be useful for Public Works and surplus. So that's our first property that we're going to auction. And these others fall in series. The lot on East Florida, we're still examining whether it's buildable in terms of zoning. It's not certain yet. It's kind of small.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, did you have a question?
Just a quick question. How likely are these to sell, and are these R4 residential properties?
Wiley is residential, Glover is commercial, Florida, I think, is residential also, and Wright is residential. Yeah, I think they'll all sell. If nothing else, someone might buy it for a side yard and that sort of thing.
Grace?
Thank you. I had some kind of similar questions about wondering what else could be done with these properties. Like, we've leased some in the past for gardens and the house for, housing people, renovations, habitat project, whatever else it might be. And it seems like that's been addressed. And you said that, the city would look into those options. And if not, then go to auction. So I'm just wondering why ask for approval for auction before asking those organizations or seeking that? Because for me, it feels kind of strange because the resolution is saying that the city has no other uses for them or other alternatives, but we're supposed to agree with that before it sounds like really looking into them.
So with the just to take them one at a time, with the Glover Avenue property, that's a standout in terms of a property that has significant value. There are certainly other uses for it, other private commercial uses for it. There's no city use for it, public use for it. And so, there was an intention to use it for public works, and now plans have changed. In terms of the Wiley property, grants management has decided that it doesn't fit their programming. They've probably already reached out to Habitat, and they may be considering it. If not, it'll happen very soon. But that's not giving a property to Habitat. Well, in the terms of this resolution, I'm suggesting that's not a city purpose. But I do understand where you're coming from there, and that maybe in the larger sense, it is a city purpose. But I'm actually pessimistic that Habitat is going to want this property. It's they build a particular type of house for their programming, and this is not that house, and it needs a lot of work. And so I'm actually just pessimistic. And so I'd rather move on towards what I expect to be the ultimate disposition of the Wiley property, which is a sale. The Wright Street property, again, it would be great to combine that property with the parcel to the north, but I'm quite pessimistic on it. It's an out-of-state owner who has passed away, and it's very. Let's just say I'm pessimistic on being able to combine those. And we've already owned that property for decades. We don't even know, it's so long ago, we don't know why we came to own it. And I'm just trying to put a punctuation mark at the end of that property. And then the East Florida property is maybe buildable, marginally buildable, probably not buildable, and pessimistic that we're gonna find a public purpose for that. And so trying to queue it up for what I expect to be the ultimate disposition.
There's no motion on the floor, but I'd just like to say that I think we need to disaggregate these. I think that it's very, you've made a compelling case for the public works lot. That's a really big lot. But there are other ones that is a little bit ambiguous and so forth. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a motion. We can have discussion. I'm going to make a motion. Please don't make me read all those parcel numbers. Sorry, I will read them. Whoops, sorry, got the wrong tab up here. I'll move ordinance number 2021-10046, an ordinance authorizing sale of city-owned real estate at 1407 Wiley Drive, which is parcel number 922116 352006. 809 South Glover Avenue, which is 922116 181-007, and 1811 East Florida Avenue, which is 922116 481-061, and 1106 North Wright Street, 912107 251-002, to City Council with a recommendation for approval, removing the Wright Street property from that ordinance.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Sharice, was that you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the motion is to recommend all four properties to City Council with the exception of Wright Street. You'd like to pull that one from the group?
I would like to pull that one from the group.
Okay, that was motioned by Mary Alice and seconded by Sharice. Is there any discussion? No. We'll start with Jaya.
I just wanted to say for the house on Wiley, I'd like to reinforce if there's some way that it can go to helping residents that's in my ward. It's an area that definitely could use that TLC. It's quite close to my house. It's really close to the school. So if there's some way that we can encourage Habitat or another community partner to take that on as a way to provide safe housing for our community, I'd really like to see that happen.
Sharice.
Yeah, I think the other thing regarding the Wright Street property, because when I look at it, it has an address for Wright Street. However, it seems more attached to the East Street lot. Are there any structures on that East Street lot? I don't think so.
No, I think both parcels are vacant.
Right. So I guess that's why I'm thinking that it could be easily attached. And maybe after the probate goes through, the heirs to the deceased would be able to sell that entire lot, and for there to be a structure, a house put on there. I don't know planning, and I'm not I don't have an urban planning background or anything like that. It just seems that it would be more sellable if it was in fact a part of the East Street lot. So, okay.
Mary Alice.
So if possible, I would like staff, the reason I didn't pull Wiley from my original motion was I was hoping that staff could reach out to a variety of places to find out if that is a property that could be sold for $1, which is what we usually do for Habitat, but maybe to some other organization. Then I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a background in terms I wanted to pull the last property because we don't want to create a situation in which we have some bad actors who go through and buy little parcels of and then try and sell them for a lot of money so that other people can buy a house. And so I think that we need to be really cautious if we're selling off that little piece of land there. We need to ensure that hopefully there's some way that we can combine those lots. So that's the rationale for me pulling that 1106 parcel out of there, but I would be amenable to pulling out the Wiley one out if we are able to find another organization that would be able to use it, to leverage it for housing.
Any further discussion? Grace?
Thanks. Yeah, I have concerns about a lot of them. The Public Works one, I feel like, is the one on Glover that I could feel comfortable saying yes to on that at this point. The Wiley Drive, I feel like for the house, the same thing. I think we could see if there's another organization who's willing to use or renovate it for housing purposes or for, I don't know, their own organizational use. And then also looking at the one on Florida Avenue, I was trying to see if it was on a bus route, which it looks like it's not, but I think that it would be. But of something like in the Sustainability Advisory Commission, we've been talking about hospitable bus stops or like warming centers. And that seems like just a tiny little awkward shaped parcel right there on Florida, close to Philo Road, that could potentially be used for something like that. It looks like maybe there's not at least a lot of bus traffic through there or a good stop. But community gardening or other uses there. And I would like to feel more confident that we've investigated these other routes before approving them for auction.
Okay, anyone else have anything? All right, so we are going to vote on the 4 properties, but removing right from the grouping. So that is the motion on the floor, and we will take the roll call.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin.
No.
Okay, that motion passes and we'll move on to City Council. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2021-09-044, an ordinance revising the FY 2020 annual budget. Budget amendment number 3. Any, Chief Serafin, do you want to speak, or should we just put the motion on the floor? How do we want to get this started?
Well, I guess how we want to get it started is sort of up to you. I've got some questions that have come in that if you'd like me to speak to, so I can do some of that if you'd like. First and foremost, I think some of you or most of you or all of you in some way, shape, or form made the town hall meetings. So I suppose at this point I can wait till some questions come in, or I guess.
I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mary Alice.
I will move that we keep in committee ordinance number 2021-09-044, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2022 annual budget amendment number 3.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mary Alice to keep this item in committee for another meeting, seconded by Chris. Any discussion?
I'd like to hear what Brian's questions were.
Yeah.
Okay, it's your floor, Chief Serafin.
Okay. I jotted down a few of the things that had come in we've gotten some feedback on with regards to the meetings and some of the emails, and so I wanted to try to attempt to clarify as best I can some of those issues. One of those, and it was spoken to tonight a little bit with regard to the FOIA and the exemptions. And sometimes we get caught up in euphemisms. Is something FOIA-able? I'm not sure that's, and I use it too. Is it a real word? But all of our public documents, you can submit a FOIA request for. The question becomes, what is the response? And sometimes that's a complete denial. Sometimes it's a complete release of the information, but most of the documents that are worked within FOIA end up being what we call partial denials. In other words, some of it goes out and some of it's redacted. And then there's usually some discussion with regards to what gets redacted. So someone would submit a FOIA by statute. Right now, we'd have to go through this sort of analysis: what would stay and what would go. Excuse me. And we would. It is our best researched effort right now between city staff, which includes attorneys and the FOIA officer, as well as outreach with the Illinois Attorney General's office, that the data itself is not, that we would be exempted from a FOIA request. So, as was spoken to, again, there's some legislative efforts with regards to the making it statutorily just not subject to FOIA. There are certain things that that the law calls for that we can do that. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that particular issue, and hopefully that helps a little bit. So there is an effort to make it by statute not subject to FOIA. That has not passed. So as such, it would go through the regular process, but we believe it would be, the specifics would be, plates and stuff would be exempt. I got a question regarding some of maybe the nuance of language with regards to owning data and possessing data. And I believe the policy talks about possessing, and the PowerPoint said owning. The city of Urbana would own the data, but we don't physically have it here, again, as I said, on site. It's our data, but it's off site. We were having some discussions, perhaps maybe it's people, I think the analogy somebody used was Fidelity. I own stocks, but I don't really have them. They're possessed by, and Fidelity manages those particular stocks for me in my retirement account. So I don't know if that, again, we control the data. I think that's the most important point there. I did reach back out, and as has been discussed many times in varying forums here over the last several weeks, with regards to any sort of academic or scholarly articles that support the uses of LPRs, and it seems that they're lacking. So if the University of Illinois would like to do one, absolutely, we would be able to participate and help them with that particular study if that's something that someone in the academic world would like to take on. And I'd also gotten some questions that there seems to always be some concern regarding, again, the usage of this data. I said this during one of the town hall meetings, if not both of them, with regards to some of the legalese that was brought up, I think, in one of the council meetings here a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to do some research. And so we believe we found the right phrase that was quoted, and it was, and I wrote it down, so bear with me. We may share your personal information with our third-party service providers at our discretion. That had to do with the customers, those who purchased Flock, those who sign up for Flock. So as when people sign up for Amazon and other sorts of services, it was not referring to the data of the license plates in the database. So those are some of the things I wanted to try and clarify tonight. I'll wait here as you guys have some discussion. If I can maybe suss out a little more information for you, I'll do that.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for coming out tonight, Chief. And thank you for the town halls last week. I mean, that was great. So Chief, my email account and tonight's public input, some of it, is getting, people are telling me that we need these cameras to keep us safe. We need these cameras to stop the shootings. And you at the town hall, on your PowerPoint, and you even said it in the microphone, these cameras do not deter anything. So could you maybe, for those people that are telling me that we need the cameras to be, for us to be safe, to stop the shootings, could you maybe address the confusion here? Because you're saying they don't deter anything.
So what I can say is I don't have any sort of study that says they deter crime that I'm aware of. We've gotten some facts and figures that show there's some reduction in this, or there's been more arrests or better clearance rate and some of those kinds of things. You touched on something a little bit that had to do with whether or not people feel safe. And the inputs to that are a variety of different things. Some people might feel safe if they know that the readers are out there. So that maybe is a little bit hard to quantify. What I would say with regards to this is that whenever we have and I think we talked about this at one of the town hall meetings, when we speak about the impact of this tool. As I said, as an example, we've had burglaries, or we have 10 car burglaries on a Saturday night. Probably aren't 10 car burglars there. When we've made arrests, we'll find one person with property from 10 different cars. Similarly, we know that not everyone in Champaign-Urbana is shooting. So if we make an arrest on one, we know that there are retaliations and whatnot, and we know we've worked cases where we've had one subject who has committed more than one shooting. So if indeed we can build a solid case, make an arrest, we might indeed stop that person. A specific deterrent effect for that particular person would not be committing more shootings. So I don't know if I can draw a real clear line for you, but I guess that would be my response at this point.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll let others go ahead. So, how to say this? So, the shooting or the crime happens, and if you get a verbal description of the car, and if the car drives by a camera, you might be able to catch the person that shot. the gun, maybe, right? Is that the kind of what it does?
Yeah, yes, that's in one way, that's correct. Like I said, it's.
I know it's more complicated than that, but generally that's the system.
Sure, right? and you're right. If somebody snakes back out and around and sneaks out of the back way of the subdivision and doesn't drive by a camera, then it wouldn't.
I'm not saying that, but
Right.
they do need to drive by the camera for you to be able to identify the car, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Therese.
I guess I want to just interject something. And Chief, you know, I don't know if I would be saying this right, because I think my whole idea of how this works is, and I've not ever said that it was a deterrent, but to be used as a tool. And I think of it as if there is a shooting that happens in a particular area, and we'll just, you know, for the sake of argument, say it's right like down the street from my house, and there is a and it happens at 2:30 in the morning when there's not a lot of traffic, and nobody really knows what the car is or what what drove by, but within 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after, or 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after this particular shooting happens, there are 8 cars that go through that get captured by an ALPR. My belief, and I could be wrong, but I think I've been saying this correctly, is that that's a starting point, at least for the police to knock on a door and ask, did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Based on what you get, you know, they may not get, it may not be something that happens right away, but at least you have a starting point to question someone. Correct? As well as whoever lives in the area.
So, I mean, I'll start with, yes, a lead, an LPR, license plate lead, is better than no lead at all. And I think that's some of the value of this particular system. And so, yes, indeed, if in your example, if we had 8 cars that went by then that were in a very, you know, distinct time frame, that might be where we would have to start our investigation. So again, a lead from an LPR is better than no lead.
And I just wanted to add, like last week, while we were in city council meeting, Urbana Police knocked on my door and I had to go upstairs and answer the door because there was a report of 2 loud booms, which were assumed, I think, to be gunshots. And they knocked on my door to ask if I'd heard anything. And I'm in the middle of a city council meeting, so I'm really kind of focused, and not only that, but somewhat isolated here in the basement. And I had to say, no, I didn't hear anything. And they were like, are you sure? Did you, you know, I said, I'm sorry. And then of course I had to say, I'm in city council meeting right now, so I have to go back, you know, to my meeting. But I think it's just what it does is just enhance. If you heard, you know, 2 loud booms and no one saw anything, you know, I would think that the police, and I may be wrong, would start with asking people that live around the area if they heard or saw anything. And what an ALPR might be able to do, because I mean, it could be backfire from a car, you know, but what an ALPR would do is I would think at least add to that investigation. Am I correct?
Yes, I think so. I think initially, I believe what would happen initially in a shooting event, we would continue to do what we've done. We'd flood the area and start looking for witnesses, looking for victims, looking for suspects. We'd physically go there, try to find the crime scene, do what we've done, and make that initial collection of that information. Then we would be able, again, this isn't like a shot spotter thing. Then we would take this, okay, what do we have? We might have somebody who gave us something already that we can then build on with the LPR imagery.
Grace.
Thank you. I have quite a few questions. So I don't know if we're able to go quickly or if it's a longer answer, let me know. But with the scenario that you were just talking about with, say, 8 cars drive past an LPR after a shooting, then would police follow up with all of those 8 vehicles?
I guess it would be fact specific. If there were 8 cars and we knew, hey, it was a red car, we'd follow, and there were only 2 were red, then we'd only go probably after the 2 red ones. So I guess I'd need a little more information to real accurately do it, but without anything else, and if there was a very severe crime, it's quite possible they could follow up with all 8.
And also to clarify, an ALPR image, you said that alone doesn't count for cause for an arrest or investigation or hot list, correct?
It would allow for investigation, but it would not. It's not probable cause just simply to make an arrest based on the license plate.
Because it sounds like the system still requires the community cooperation and reporting. So it seems like I don't understand how it helps that issue of no one reporting the crimes to police, because it still depends on that to report a crime. Otherwise, you just have traffic data. And then my other question is, who's to say that if a neighbor calls the police for a shooting, maybe they say they saw a white car driving down the street, maybe it was actually silver. And then, the white car, a next white car, unrelated, passes the closest ALPR after that time, and police stop that car. The person might not immediately get out of the car and on the ground, and now that person's either arrested for resisting arrest or has force used on them for compliance. So I guess my other question here in that scenario is, how would an officer verify that they have the correct vehicle, let alone the correct person for a hit? In the presentations, you talked about verifying that it was the correct hit, and I'm not sure how that would be done.
So, well, first of all, we have that problem now. People can call us and say white when it was silver. They say blue when it was black. They say purple when it was brown. So we already have to sort of sort through all of those things. So I don't think necessarily that that is, I wouldn't let that derail the conversation. With regards to how the verification would work, it is my understanding, and again, I don't own this. The way that I understand the system is that we would first of all want to verify that indeed, do we have the right, do the numbers match on there? I know there was discussion, I think earlier tonight, regarding Sharpies and altering things. I guess all of those things are possible, but we have to work in, that's why there's terms called reasonable suspicion. We have to work in a world of what's reasonable. And so I think in that regard, we'd have to confirm that indeed, is it the plate? Are the numbers actually correct? And secondly, then, is it still actively wanted through the system? Is there any sort of backup or other sort of issues? So the officers would then run the license plate. Indeed, it showed indeed that it is still stolen from Champaign, Illinois, or wherever it would come from. So I think there's 2 things. A, does it physically, do the numbers and letters physically match? And then B, confirm by a database query that it indeed is still wanted.
Thank you. And then just one more, and then I'll give other people a chance. In the town halls, you said that there were no cameras in the city of Urbana. And I was wondering what those things are that look like cameras at quite a few of our intersections.
I don't know. IDOT might have a couple of things. The city of Urbana, as far as we don't know, it looks like I saw another hand raised. We don't run those. So there could be some university ones. But there's none that the city of Urbana Police Department operates.
I would suggest that the the systems for controlling lights when emergency vehicles pass through intersections do kind of look like cameras. So there may be some of those in Urbana.
Mary Alice?
Yeah, there are some, if I may, there are some signal interrupters as well that are up, that are on certain intersections that have to do with fire trucks, and they cause the traffic lights to turn green for the public safety vehicles. So there's some of those. There's a variety of different things, but they're not Urbana police cameras.
Mary Alice?
I think part of the crux of the concern, I mean, there's lots of concerns in the community, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into Grace's question, which is there is a report of.
Can I interrupt you? I meant to do this before you started speaking. It's basically 10:30, and so we'll need to, someone will make a motion to extend the meeting.
I move to extend till 11 o'clock.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by James, seconded by Sharice. We'll, lost my word. Stay here till 11 o'clock.
If the clerk has to call the roll.
Yes.
It's time to go. Okay. Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes. Okay, so that motion passes. We've got 30 more minutes. Mary Alice, continue your point.
Thank you. So I think the crux of the issue is that you have potentially innocent people, have nothing to do with the crime, but there was a description and there were 3 white cars, I think Durrell used this example, that could potentially have been involved in a crime. And you say, well, this is an investigative point. So I think the crux of the question is, if it is investigative and you have multiple entities that could potentially be, what is the reaction of the police? How do they interact with those 3 potential white cars? Do they pull them over, stop, ask a question? Do they pull them over, pull their gun, ask them to get out, lay on the ground? So that's what I'm trying to tease out here a little bit.
Sure, and my answer is it'll depend. It'll depend on the time in the report. What's the delay? Do we think there was 3 people that were involved in shootings? As we pull up behind the white car, are there bullet holes in it because the other people were shooting back? So it might be something simple as following up a week later, knocking on a door, depending on the timing, or it might be a felony stop as you've described. So there's, I think, a variety of different scenarios that might result, depending on time, location, other evidence, people involved, witness, so I think it's going to be really hard for me to tell you exactly how, but I understand the question, right? I mean, I think that's exactly what Grace was talking about a little bit earlier, Mary Alice, was how, and I just don't have a good answer for you because it will be fact specific.
Okay, so I guess you have the extreme, right? You have, bullet holes in the car versus just a white sedan driving down the street. So what I'm hearing you say, and it'd be great to hear confirmation of it, the simple fact that you're a white car that was identified and there was one of 3, but there's no other factors, you're not going to pull them over with guns and ask them to be on the ground. It sounds to me like what you're describing to me is that you're going to go and follow up and knock on their door and ask them questions, because that's the issue. People are worried about people getting caught up. And so if you have nothing but the description of the car might have been involved with gun violence of some kind, there's no other factors involved there. How is that person treated?
So again, so it might depend on how far away it was. So in other words, is this 10 minutes away or is this 3 hours that we found the car? That it's flirting about. If it is a car from a shooting, yeah, we might have to there's 2 cars and they don't know, and they're both screaming away from the spot. There might be 2 felony stops that occur. But again, I don't know. It's going to depend on all the facts and circumstances presented at the time. So that's going to be the best answer that I can give you tonight.
Okay.
Sharice, you have your hand up?
Yes. I was kind of going to ask that same kind of question because of Mr. Norris's unfortunate incident that he had in Richmond, California, or Walnut City, California, or something, where apparently someone, the way I took it is that someone had taken his license plate and replaced it with their license plate, which was probably wanted on many warrants or something. And he had, 7 police cars and 14 policemen pointing a gun at him with his family in the back. Because I don't know anything about investigative stuff, if a license plate comes up and it is read properly, do the license plates carry with it, will that information carry with it make and model of a car? So that something like that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a good question. And as I listened to his story tonight, I absolutely understand that. And it's, as a police executive, it's horrifying. So I get that. I think in this particular case, when they took the plate from one and moved it to the other, license plates do have a make and a general model. So it might not say Toyota Camry, might say Toyota sedan or Toyota 4-door. It's been a while since I've run a license plate, but it'll be very, very general. But it wouldn't, and there's no color, at least in Illinois, in the license plates that are listed. And so, if somebody were to put a Toyota sedan versus a Toyota coupe, and they get them close, then something like this could very well happen. If it was from a Chevy pickup to a Toyota Camry, then that would be something that that at least should pause and cause the officers to pause and investigate further.
Is there if something like that were to happen, would it be proper for the police to stop the car to just let the driver know your license plate does not match the make that we have of that license plate? Did would it be proper to stop if for no other reason, informational reasons?
Yes, if the registration does not match the vehicle, yes, that's reasonable suspicion to stop a motor vehicle in Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Sorry, Chief, to batter you with the 3 white car scenario, but let me combine people's concerns here and Mary Alice's questions here. Okay, what if, and your answer is completely correct. It's the totality of the circumstances, and that can be so many different things. So you passed the law school exam with that answer. But I guess what I'm going to ask is, like a Parkland College the other night, if the circumstances, the police are answering a call where there is someone on the ground with a chest wound from a bullet, and they get a description of a white car, and there are 3 white cars on the camera. I think Mary Alice's question is, what is the police response when they are believing that somebody in these white cars just shot somebody? So what's going to be, are the guns going to be out, or are they just going to, casually come up to the door and say, hey, how you doing? I don't know. What do you think? When just with the information, we do have someone on the ground bleeding.
So these scenarios present now. I know that this is sort of couched in the conversation of LPRs, but we'll have a report of shots fired, someone down. The police will respond, and the first officer might go in. I don't, FYI, a blue Chevy just went tearing out of the subdivision heading south. We have some of these situations, and depending on when they go, they might absolutely. And if I had an officer, we will absolutely do a felony stop where we would stop the car. We would follow directions, and everyone should go home fine. And then we can investigate it. Sometimes officers have done these things and we found, oh, there's another victim, and somebody was taking a victim to the hospital. So, well, that's not a suspect car at all. So we have to untangle some of these things. Currently, this isn't just a brand new thing that we haven't contemplated. And there are times as well where we'll say I don't know what else is happening. We can only control maybe the scene. So we've got 2 victims and 3 witnesses and people screaming and crying. They might not even worry about the cars right now. All we can do with the handful of officers we have. We're going to deal with the case that's before us, and we'll have to follow up with some of those cars later. So as you've said, it's the totality of the circumstances, and that then also helps to dictate some of the tactics.
Grace.
Thank you. I was wondering about funding. So if we went with this, it seems like this would be $55,000 that's in police budget for technology that could go towards ALPRs. What about in future years? Is that a reoccurring thing that could be spared from that budget?
So that is a question that is not necessarily within my purview exactly to answer. When we began exploring this option, exploring this tool or this potential tool, this is out of a police equipment and a uniform line item that we have used for years for different pieces of equipment that may arise. So this right now, the city would have to do some examination as to how we would be able to fund this moving forward. That's partly why we've called this the pilot program. We want to at least see, is this something that is useful at all? That's why we identified this as money that had been set aside. If it wasn't for this project, I would ask the council, can we carry this forward anyway? Because there's other areas we might need to use some of this funding. But we thought this was a great tool to respond to at least requests of some people from the community.
Okay, thank you. And then I had another question, I guess maybe kind of 2 questions about stuff coming out of kind of reflections on the town halls of how this decision was made to go with Phlox instead of other companies or other alternatives or just any solutions out there. And it seemed like the answer given was that this has that interoperability and ease of convenience of sharing with other municipalities. And I was wondering if that was the correct answer, or if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
That's the correct answer. It simply was one Flock had gotten a bit of a foothold throughout some of our neighboring cities, and it's just, I think that interoperability is useful.
Thank you. And then my other question was maybe bigger picture. I don't know if the mayor or staff is interested in weighing in, but I'm also wondering what other things we're looking into for community safety. If we're saying that it's a yes and thing with the readers, what else are we doing to address community safety and gun violence?
Mayor, do you want to handle this?
Yes, I'm unmuting. Thank you. There are lots of opportunities, and we have been working for years with the Community Coalition, CU Fresh Start, investing in neighborhoods through housing. I went through the list at the town halls last week, and we've made it very clear that it isn't an either or. We have to do both for short term and long term. I think the funding coming from the state of Illinois is really good news. It would make sense for Urbana and Champaign to collaborate as much as possible. And I've already had some conversations with folks from Champaign about this, especially in terms of looking at community safety. We know these shootings go back and forth across the city limits, and as much as we can cooperate, the better. So having this new public health focused funding and is welcome news. And like we said, we also have our ARPA funds, and I expect that gun violence is going to come out as a high, or community safety is going to come out at a high priority in your goal setting sessions as well. So it's not like we're not doing anything on a lot of different fronts. This, as I've said multiple times, seemed like a reasonable investigative tool that could help us solve some of these shootings, because so many of them, guns and cars, have gone together, probably more so than many other different crimes. People tend to come in and out of neighborhoods, back and forth between the cities and around the towns in vehicles. And that's what made this seem like certainly something worth exploring, and to give an extra tool to try to solve some of these shootings, to hold people accountable. And at the same time, we can invest in people, programs, and services, which we know we have to do. But that's going to take, whatever we do, takes time to see results.
Mary Alice?
I wanted to add something to what Diane was talking about. So it'll be coming in front of City Council shortly. Social service grants, one of the thing that we're focusing on are youth services. So I believe, and Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, what is the dollar figure for the funds this year? Is it 200,000?
I'm going to let Sheila answer that, and I believe she'll be giving a presentation on that next week.
Yeah.
Yes, I will, Mary Alice. Thank you, Mayor. Our budget this year, since it's only city funding, is about $100,000.
Okay, all right, because we used to combine the township. So, okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was more of a precursor to what we were doing to let people know that we are working on funding for youth programs at $100,000. I don't want to take over in terms of questions for the chief. I just had some discussion topics, but I don't know if it's appropriate to do those at this time, unless other people have questions for the chief.
I do have questions. So Mary Alice.
Okay, I will take the chair.
Okay, so question. What do you say to the comments and the evidence that is being presented that there are many cities moving away from ALPRs because they lack efficacy?
So I guess my response to that would be, I don't know enough of how they put them up, where they use them, how they use them, some of the neighborhoods. So I suppose that maybe they weren't as useful as they thought they were. Maybe there were budget issues. So I guess my response to that is I don't really know enough about it. But I do recognize it. And so somebody's decided they don't want to. I mean, there have been other tools we've had where we've decided it wasn't quite as good as we wanted it to be, and so we've gone other directions. So I understand it. I'd like to see how we can use it here.
So I've looked at Rockford's use of ALPRs, and there was an article that specifically said that the usage of the ALPRs, they spent like, I think, $250,000 since 2017, and they have shown no effectiveness, and that's 4 years. And also California has had these for many, many years. And in February of last year, the California auditor did audits on 4 cities in California that had had the ALPRs. And they determined there was a lot of holes in them, including like questions around, they claimed that it was CGIS safe or CGIS certified or whatever, but the company wasn't able to verify that. And, you know, the entities who implemented the ALPRs didn't follow up to make sure that they were CGIS certified. Have you been able to determine that with Flock? Other than based on their word?
No, I've not done any sort of inspection or anything like that, no.
Okay, I think that may be important to verify before entering into contracts with them. Also, policy changes. There have been talks about the police department enacting policies and then sort of changing them after they've been sort of implemented. Would that happen here with this policy around ALPRs once it's finalized?
My response would be it's possible depending on what the issue is. So we've already had some discussion regarding having two persons involved in the audit process. Those are the kinds of things that we need to maintain. If there's something that says that it's supposed to happen on a Tuesday and it works better on a Wednesday, some smaller detail, I could see where a minor change could be made.
I don't see, you know, the policy holding like, oh, we're going to have it on Tuesday and it moves to Wednesday. I think that's a minor detail that doesn't need to be included in the policy. I'm thinking, you know, big picture items like if there's changes in the oversight of it, where you change the person who does the audit from someone, outside of the police department to someone inside. Those are the major changes that I think that perhaps should be brought back to council before implementing or changing. I think the biggest concern is this policy will be implemented and then based on history, those changes are made and, you know, council or the community isn't aware of those changes. So I think that it's important to also state that if policy changes, there needs to be some sort of communication that the ALPR policy has changed.
Is that a question or?
Okay, I guess it's just a comment or a recommendation.
Thank you.
That's all for now.
And I relinquish the chair back to Chandra.
Gersi, you had a question?
Thanks. Maybe if I could suss out a question from your comment there in that train of thought, that maybe a question could be, is there any requirement or intention to involve the public or council on policy changes in general? Because my understanding with other ones is that there's not. For use of force, or when we've talked about this, it's internal discussions on policy changes with no obligation for input or transparency for the public or council. So do you know if that is the case?
Can I add some, Chandra?
Is it related to the question Grace just asked?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Grace, one of the things, because use of force policy was something that came up in terms of this exact question came up. And so part of the resolution that we wrote when we did de-escalation and transparency was we wrote into the resolution that updates to the use of force policy have to be brought to city council, not for approval, but at least for an update and for comment. So it is traditionally that we don't have comment on policy, but I wanted the public to be aware of any policy changes, significant policy changes to the use of force. So I just wanted to give you that background.
Thank you. And then if I may even retract my question, because we are getting low on time, unless people want to squeeze it in, I wanted to throw out there a suggestion that since we have 2 discussion items that we're not getting to, that we'd have a committee of the whole special meeting next week after council meeting, just to use up if we have any time, if the council meeting doesn't take up all the time, so that we could get to those discussion items next week.
Mayor.
I'm going to comment on the previous topic. I just want the public and the council to understand the city has hundreds of policies that direct internal operations, and Mary Alice is correct. They do not come to council for approval or even to be communicated as far as changes. Things change a lot depending on the circumstances, but it's not like the police department is the only department that has operating policies under which we operate. Every department does. So there are hundreds and hundreds of policies governing what we do in the city of Urbana. Use of force policy was an exception because it's just a very, very important policy and very visible to the public with an impact on the public. And that's why that was written that way.
I would argue that this policy would fall under the same sort of tenets as the use of force policy. That's just my point. But to Grace's suggestion, I guess Phyllis, do we put that on the schedule for a special CAL after? I don't know how that works.
Okay, if you want to have a special committee of the whole meeting after the council meeting, then we can do that for the discussion item if that's what you want. These meetings belong to you guys, okay? So if that's what you say you want, then that's what we'll try to make work for you.
Okay, well, we'll have a continuation of this CAL for those last two discussion items next week. And so to that point, since we are running out of time, there's a motion on the floor to keep this in committee for another meeting. It was moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Chris.
By Chris Evans.
Yes, by Chris. And so I suggest that we vote on that motion with our last remaining 5 minutes. Phyllis, will you call that roll?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Ordinance number 202109044 will stay in committee. We can do very quickly if anyone has any council input and communication.
Sharice has had her hand up for a bit.
Yes, Sharice.
I wanted to ask if Ms. Clark, so the special committee of the whole meeting, so will Chandra be the chair for that, or will it be the next person?
It would probably be the next person in line.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to have some clarification on how that would work.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only two
It's
agenda
different.
item-
If it's different, I will let you all know in advance, okay?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, Diane.
And to clarify, the only two agenda items will be those two discussion items that we didn't get to tonight.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if we should try to open up council input and communications with 3 minutes left or call it a night. I move that we adjourn and call it a night because 3 minutes isn't long enough for council input.
Second.
Okay. All right. Well, meeting's adjourned.
Good night.